dive in for another day. And hey, everyone, it's Kristi. How you doing? You can hear me, and you can hear Kevin organizing himself in the background. How you doing, Kev? Kev, my co-host for the
I'm
Kristi and Kevin
okay,
Happy
but
Hour.
don't make it seem like I'm the one that's disorganized on this one. For once,
No.
I was here on time, and someone else wasn't.
Well, to be fair, I did fly across several time zones, and yeah, that screwed me up. So, oh yes, excellent too. Because the other problem I had today, as I was telling Kevin, was I accidentally set up more than one hangout on my. It's a whole thing. So happily, I see
I
we have
can't
11 viewers.
stand. I can't stand disorganization and lateness. You know this, Christy. I run a tight ship. This up with this I shall not put.
Yeah, I did think, oh, I could get stressed out about it, and then I went, no, think about how Kevin would feel if this was him. You're like, okay, let me just throw this together.
Yeah, I'll just turn up. It'll be all right. Yeah.
Yeah. So I
I
did
have
the
the
same.
confidence of the mediocre white man running through my veins. It don't
Oof,
matter.
it's like a superpower.
Yeah, yeah.
So, hello, everyone, and thanks for joining. Kevin, why don't you tell us a little bit about why you wanted to do a happy hour on this episode before we dive into the Doctor Who Rosa episode?
Because it's fucking amazing. I mean,
It
we'll
is.
get into precisely why that is the case as we go along. But yeah, it was one of those pieces of television or film or what art, I suppose, where it genuinely moves you and is um it transcends just Saturday night TV. It's so much more than that. It almost feels cheapened to have it on TV, if that makes
Mhm.
sense.
Yeah,
So I thought it would be really nice to talk about that rather than some horrificness that we could be talking about instead.
and there's just so much horrificness to choose from on a daily basis. It's
There
nice
is
to do
indeed, but
something else.
all I'm going to say is, and I know technically it started before you got there, but you've gone there, and America all of a sudden is in the grip of domestic terrorism. I
Yeah.
don't want to say 2 and 2 equals 4, but come on now.
Come on. No, but it is the case that a lot of Trump's stated enemies have been getting pipe bombs in the post. And Trump's reaction was to chastise the media for, not controlling their being more civil in their coverage.
Exactly. You need to be more civil, and if you don't, we might blow you up. But it's nothing to do with me.
Yeah,
Is the
not him chanting
paraphrasing?
"lock her up" or
No.
saying he could shoot
Anyway,
someone on
let's
Fifth Avenue or yeah. So anyway,
enough of the seriousness. Let's get to much more light topics like racial segregation.
yeah, I was gonna say this episode reminded me the last thing that touched me as much as this episode in a Doctor Who series was probably the sunflower episode or
Mm.
the Van Gogh one.
Yeah, I actually bizarrely, and this is a total coincidence and a bizarre thing. But I was actually talking about this when I sent out like, the watch link for this earlier to promote it. Um, Someone said about they didn't enjoy the kind of pseudo historian episodes where they sort of interfere with historical events, which I can kind of get to a degree. But I actually mentioned that episode specifically because
Mhm.
it's something I've always sort of felt like I'd want to do, but I don't want to fuck with history as well. Is that if I could go back in time and bring people forward and show them the joy they brought into the world, then people sort of tortured geniuses and they would know. And that Van Gogh episode was exactly that, where it's
Very
to
much
see
so.
the joy he brings into the world.
Yeah, and I think there's a place for Daleks and super or spice adventures in Doctor Who, but it does have a space for emotion and I think they called it educational content in one of the reviews.
Indeed,
So,
yes.
do you want to
And
say?
I'm really glad that because I was just thinking, I hope it doesn't go mental and like Rosa Parks' face falls off and she's a fucking robot underneath or some
Yeah,
crazy shit, you know.
that would have been
Yeah,
not
that would
not
have
good.
slightly. I think that would have broken the tension for me. I'll be honest.
Quite. All right, now I actually have the episode that you sent or that was that I was able to watch. And I was wondering if you want us to use some of the stills from that, not obviously do any broadcast stuff because of BBC stuff, but just go through some of it because to be honest, I watched it through once, but because I got the times wrong, I was literally sitting down to watch it in preparation for the show when you said we're going live in like
Hmm.
5, 4, 3, 2, 1. So do you want to use that as a reference? Is that okay? Should I share my screen and
Absolutely you can do if you wish. I can't help but feel that this because of the time problem, this now doesn't feel appropriate because you watched it once.
No, I've
Oh,
watched it, but you're gonna
you
have to
did
help me
watch
with
it.
it a little bit more. Yeah,
That's what
yeah,
I
yeah. I
mean.
watched it
Yes, I
through
kind of
once.
feel
I
like
was just gonna take notes.
I'm not exactly. Yeah. Well, I've watched it I think 5 times now. The last 2 times taking notes specifically, and we were going to do a thing where we do half of the episode each, and all of that jazz, and that's
Well,
not going to fucking happen now.
well, I was set. No, we're going to have to do it more of an interactive two-person the whole way through along the way. But like I said, I did watch it and I did note some things. So, in terms of starting, are we starting at an okay point here with the opening,
Oh, well, I'll have to
or
look
is
at the
it?
fucking thing. Hang on.
Oh yeah, you have timestamps or something, or what do you
By the
have?
way, that's the outline of that is my TV. Because this is how we had to work it. Because Kristi lives in foreign land. It doesn't really matter where. She doesn't get the iPlayer, the BBC iPlayer, which is where you can watch all the TV shows after they've been like aired and stuff. So I filmed my TV playing the iPlayer, and that's my TV there.
It's a very nice TV you have.
Thank you, thank you. That's an odd, that's an odd compliment. But yeah, thank you. Okay, so I suppose we should probably go through the episode, or should I say, I'll go through the fucking episode,
And
shall
I'll
I?
make commentary.
Jesus.
Yeah.
Yes, please do. Right. Right, so Kristi was going to do the first half, so my notes on that are slightly less profuse, but there we go.
Should we start first
Yes.
with the changing of the Doctor and what this means for the series? Like,
Yeah, we can if you wish. You can take that if you want.
well, I don't know because I'm not there watching British television. I know that they had a new. Sorry, I'm getting a lot of backfeed. You're gonna have to put in headphones or turn my sound down.
Okay. 1 second.
Mute me.
Just
Yeah,
talk
okay.
away amongst yourselves.
Can you mute me in the meantime? No, he didn't mute me. So professional. But yeah, so there's a new Doctor. Even though there were only supposed to be, I think, up to 13 regenerations or 12 regenerations, they kind of changed the script to allow for the series to continue, especially after Christopher Eccleston left after one season. So they kind of, oh, that's a lovely noise you're making, Kevin.
Well, apologies. Yes.
That's okay. Right, so this was after Peter Capaldi left the series. They brought on new showrunner and they cast a new Doctor. And then there was the Christmas special, which I also have not had a chance to see. But this Christmas special was when the new Doctor came out.
Yes. Yeah. It's Jodie Whittaker is the actress's name, and she's very good. Yes. So this episode anyway, Rosa. It's about Rosa Parks, or at least sort of about Rosa Parks, and sort of about racism, really. It starts off in 1943 for some reason. I'm not entirely sure why. Rosa Parks gets onto a bus, but this is 12 years before the actual bus boycott thing that she's most well known for. Yeah. So and there's a kind of weird thing where you get exposed to the separation of what's called coloured, although they spell coloured wrong as well, which is very American. Coloured and white seating on buses in Montgomery, Alabama, which she's from. And then it skips forward 12 years to 1955, and more specifically to the very day before she does the bus boycott, for which she is most well known. And the TARDIS appears in a back alleyway, and they realise that there's a thing called Artron LNG, which I wasn't aware of as a thing, but apparently it's what makes the TARDIS go. And they notice that there's some of this in the local vicinity, and go to take a look. But as you can see from some of these screenshots, 2 of the people in this aren't white. They have Yaz, the young Asian girl who gets mistaken for a Mexican in this because it's American, and
Right.
Ryan, who's the young black man there on screen. And a lot of
Ryan
the
is his grandson.
Ryan is the
Ryan is
step grandson, really, of Graham, who's the older white chap, played by Bradley Walsh. Yeah, and one of the poignant elements is that they don't quite get on, because it's like I say, it's a step granddad situation where the Graham character, he was with Ryan's grandmother, but she's just recently passed. So there's a kind of coming together, but there's a tension between them to an extent. Anyway, so yeah, they go out to see what the hell this rogue Artron elegy is in Montgomery, Alabama in 1955, where it oughtn't be. And they're walking down the street, and this is the first scene where you get to see the racial tension element, which is the core of the scene. Here you see two white people walking past. The white woman drops her glove. Perfectly reasonably, he taps the white woman on the shoulder to give her the glove back, and the white
Should
man.
we? Oh yeah. I was gonna say maybe we could play that clip. I don't know if we can do it for
Oh,
content
yeah, if you want
purposes,
to,
but
yeah.
maybe we can just do it for like fair use. I don't know. We'll see if the BBC has to say about that.
Well,
Oh,
there's no,
the
yeah,
sound
okay.
will be bad. The sound will be bad. But you're right. He taps the woman on the shoulder, and this is what I think. This is actually a really important scene for setting the feel of the entire episode. I'm really glad that they did this up front. They had this confrontation up front because what ends up happening is he politely tries to give tap her on the shoulder to give her stuff back, and the man just hauls off and slaps him.
Yeah,
See here.
boom.
So that really sets a tone for what it's like to be a black person in Montgomery, Alabama at that time, which is you can be assaulted on the street and nobody will care.
Yeah, yeah, exactly. And especially the fact that he was actually trying to do something worthwhile, and
Mm-hmm.
he can't react, and they know he can't react, and you see the doctor walk in there, and Graham goes and holds him back, and actually in a piece, an interesting subtle piece of character development or whatever, you see Yaz, who's actually a policeman back on Earth. Well, technically they're on Earth now, but Earth 2018, police officer.
Oh, you dropped out for a second.
Like, sir, in the kind of
Sorry, you dropped
traditional
out for a second. So,
police officer fashion.
yeah, not a woman police officer, just a police officer. Like in the Hot Fuzz episode. But yeah, she's a
Okay, she's a police lady person with
yes.
boobs, and she steps in the
We'll
way
clarify.
of them and says, "Step back, sir," in the kind of British police officer fashion. Yeah, which was quite nice. But yeah, you see the racial tension. I mean, he calls he says, "Get your big black hands off my wife" or something.
Mm-hmm.
And actually, what you see in this scene as well, when Rosa Parks comes in, if you just scroll on ever so slightly, who's by the way played by oh, what's her name? I wrote down Vignette Robinson, who's absolutely superb actress, who played Lestrade's deputy in Sherlock, of all things as
Oh,
well.
is that
Anyway,
her? Oh,
that is
wow.
her. Yes,
Wow.
she's very, very good.
Yeah.
And she plays Rosa Parks brilliantly. I mean, really exceptional performance. Yeah, she steps in. But what you see to a degree is the because it's educational, you see a slightly expositional thing where they
Mm-hmm.
have to explain things in a way that if this was a natural conversation, they would never talk. She explains the case of Emmett Till, who was a black man who was murdered in Mississippi just before this for daring to lay his hands on a white woman, so to speak.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, but yeah, she explains it in a way that has too much detail in it. That, like, if you were mentioning Emmett Till, you would know. I think people at the time would know, so they wouldn't explain it in that way, if that makes
Mm-hmm.
sense. So it's slightly clunky, slightly heavy, but worthwhile nonetheless because it sets the scene of this is the South, in the United States in the 1950s, and it's incredibly racially segregated and rather shitty. Anyways,
Yeah,
so
I
yeah,
think
she
we
steps
sometimes
in.
forget. Yeah, sorry. We sometimes forget Doctor Who is actually made for kids. Even though adults take it and appropriate it and they, talk about it and they own it too, but really when they think about the content, how scary something is or the level at which they pitch it, it is going to be aimed at kids because they want it to be a family entertainment. So it always has that kind of mentality to it. And so these opportunities, these expositions are for people who just don't know the background, but also to teach kids, that this wasn't so long ago
Well,
when
I'm not.
things were
Yeah, I
happening.
have to say, I'm not. Yes, I agree to an extent, but I think I have to disagree to a certain extent as well. I don't think it is necessarily pitched at kids. I think they're trying to just be broad because, like you say, it's a family thing. So it's meant to. It's got bits in there for everyone, if that makes sense.
Yeah, but it's never going to be like more than, like TV 13 or 12. They're not going to put in a lot of blood and gore, or they're not going to be very
Yeah.
violent in their language because
Oh yeah, yeah, absolutely. Any violence is always sort of almost a kind of euphemistically implied in many cases, as
it
actually we
is.
see later on with the baddie,
Yeah.
which we'll get to in a moment.
But
Yes,
yeah, so it was pitched at a way that everybody can understand, and also bring everybody who's never heard of this situation up to speed on how dangerous it is for people to be not white in this location at this time.
indeed. And you start to see elements where the two white characters, although technically the Doctor isn't white, but she's in the form of a white woman, so
Hmm.
that's how she's seen by everyone else. Um, they begin to understand their white privilege and actually use it in quite good ways throughout the episode. Yeah, so if you just scroll, yeah, Rosa Parks steps in, explains all that, calms everything down, and they go their separate way. If you just scroll on,
Yep.
there we
And at
go, and
this
then you
point,
see the baddie. Here he is,
yeah.
whose name I did write it down. It's Crossgo, although you don't learn that till slightly later on. Anyway, he's um, you later find out he's a criminal from the future, basically, and he's come to tinker with the past, and we'll get onto exactly why in a second. Anyway, he discovers the TARDIS, tries to make it beam off into the future or the past, and that fails.
Hmm.
So you're introduced to him, and then you scroll on slightly further. There we go. They sat in a bar. Normal scene, right? Black
Hmm.
black person, Asian person, two white people sat in a bar, chatting about the situation they're in. There's a bit more expositional stuff about Rosa Parks and Martin Luther King, and then
Yeah.
Graham notices it's gone very quiet because this is not a place that serves people of color.
Hmm.
And the white woman comes, the white, oh, you've scrolled on slightly too far.
Okay.
You've scrolled on slightly too far.
This woman.
Here we go, there we go. Yes, she comes over and says, "We don't serve Negroes." And then, in a wonderful piece of historical thievery, because this was actually a joke
Yeah.
from Muhammad Ali, of all people, back when
Yeah.
he was Cassius Clay. He just returned from the 1960 Olympics with the gold medal, heavyweight boxing gold medal for the United States. Went into, I think he lived in Memphis, if I recall. Went into a restaurant which was whites only at the time. Sat down, and they said, "We don't serve N words," and he said, "That's okay. I don't eat them," which is nice.
Yeah.
Um, and so yeah, they appropriate, they reappropriate, I should say, that joke.
Yeah.
And yeah, and the Yaz character, who's Pakistani heritage, gets confused for a Mexican. So that's which is another running joke throughout the episode, which is quite
Mm.
funny in a way.
Yeah.
They then go out. You see for the first time that the white characters get a sense of how dangerous it is for the black characters in the episode because of the time and place they are. The Doctor advises that they go back to the TARDIS for their safety, but they say, "Nah, fuck that noise," and decide to
Yeah.
go on an adventure.
Well, actually, what they say is people live with this every day. So if they can do it for their lives, we can do it for a few hours.
Oh
But
well, you didn't take any fucking notes, but you've got a memory, have you? Jesus.
yes, I do have a memory. Some things stick
Also,
out.
also notice in the top left-hand side of the screen how I delightfully and very delicately titled this file.
Is it written there? I can't see it.
Yeah, top left of the screen.
Uh, oh, I can't see it in my window for some weird reason. But oh yes, in,
Anyway,
in the tab, in the tab,
yeah,
right? Yes, the
yeah,
motherfucking whoo.
indeed, indeed, because I'm a classy lassie. That's all that has to be said there. Anyways, and even look in the background there, you notice the white people staring at the fact that you've got these a Mexican and a Negro, as they were just referred to.
Yeah,
Um, yeah,
hanging out
um,
with a white dude.
exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. Very
Well,
strange scene in Montgomery, Alabama. Anyways, right. What happens next? Um,
well,
yes.
mm-hmm.
No,
She
go on.
meets Maddie. She meets Baddie guy. Rosa meets
She
Baddie.
meets the baddie, or should I say, he surreptitiously enters her vision, whatever.
Mm-hmm.
But it's a kind of slightly pointless scene because he just says, "No, there's no problem, ma'am," even though he speaks in a British accent for the most part. Um, and actually, that's the thing I noticed throughout this. It's not really integral to the thing, but it was slightly annoying. Is that none of the, even though it's mentioned by some of the other characters who are locals, they don't seem to be that perturbed by the fact that these people aren't dressed like anything from the period
That's
and
true.
don't
Yeah.
talk like anything from the period, and geographically, their accents are just ridiculously out of whack. but no
Yeah.
one seems to be put off by that. And the fact that they keep just reappearing randomly in Rosa Parks' life. She doesn't seem like, well, this is fucking weird. How come these people keep appearing? What? But anyway, I mean, it's a sci-fi show, willing
Right.
suspension of disbelief, you know?
Very much so.
Anyway, so yeah, this is the scene. They break into the bus depot, which is empty, and apart from one suitcase, which is hidden by like a perception force field. Oh, do you want to
That's
take over for a second? Do you want to do some talking?
well, I have to say I don't quite remember. I mean, I know that at this point they start to discover they're starting to put two and two together about the baddie, and the fact that he's looking for the kind of energy that is being found in Montgomery, right?
Yes, sort of. Anyway, they open his suitcase. They find these devices, and they realize they're not the only space time travel people in the place at the time, which is sort of what they suspected, but now it's confirmed. And one of those things is a temporal displacement weapon, which is if you scroll on here ever so slightly, the baddie appears behind them and
There he
starts shooting
is.
blue shit everywhere.
Yeah.
Um,
Pew 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 pew
yeah,
pew.
and
Okay.
yeah, so he chases them away. And by the way, I should explain the temporal displacement device or weapon is something that where they you dial in a time in the future or the past, it shoots that blue laser thing at the person or whatever object, and it transports to that time zone. So basically, it's a way of disappearing them from this thing, which is important later on.
Yeah.
Anyway,
If you want
so
me to do some talking, do you want me to do a little break here? Because I could do a little bit of a reflection on the difference between the dialogue as um, delivered by a male character versus a man character versus a woman character. I noticed that with the doctor, some of the lines, like when she meets Rosa Parks for the first time, she has the line "big fan," I think, and that's not an unusual line for the doctor. That's something that I remember Tennant saying something similar about, admiring your work or whatever else. But for some reason, I find that when it's delivered by her, it sounds a little less. It sounds a little bit more ingracious, not a declarative. I don't know. Sometimes when the lines are delivered by her, it feels now in a woman's body, it feels a little bit different. It's not the same tone. And so that was one of the things I picked up on with having a woman doctor, is that it's not as if dialogue is gender neutral. It does matter who's occupying the character, and I think some of the lines where she seems a bit more aggressive or whatever else that would normally be a doctor line, it just is a little bit different. I'm not saying it's like better or worse, but that's something that the writers might, I don't know if they're going to take into account. I don't Did you get that sense at all, or was her delivery, her dialogue all the same no matter which doctor it was?
well, yeah, I picked up on the thing you noticed, but I just happened I put it down to the fact that each actor that plays the role plays it slightly differently.
Mm.
So I'm more than happy for her to just play it the way she sees fit,
Yeah,
and I
yeah, I'm
think she
not.
does a good job. It is slightly different, but every single one of them is slightly different.
That's true. Yeah.
Peter Capaldi was much more
Dark.
passive in his delivery of lines than, say,
Mm.
Christopher Eccleston was.
Yeah. And maybe too, I'm over attributing her being a woman. It might just be her style, and a different woman would deliver it, in a different way. So I don't want to overemphasize, that part of it.
Yeah, and
Um,
it would also be interesting to see if they explore whether, sorry, someone's setting off fireworks. It's not. I'm not in like the middle of a gunfight. If you can hear that in the background, yeah, it'd be interesting to see if they flesh out because obviously, like I say, she's not actually a woman; she's an AI
right.
taking woman form. But the way in which the other characters, especially the kind of minor characters, how they perceive her and react to her as a woman, as opposed to whether they would have reacted the same if they were a man.
I think it's going to be interesting going forward to see how that's handled. If
Yes.
they do bring that up, or if the doctor is just the doctor and can kind of transcend gendered expectations.
Well, there is a gender element, I think, to some of the exploration of bigotry within this show, which I'll get to slightly later on, which involves the baddie. But anyway, yeah. So,
Okay, so that was me talking a bit. Blue lights shooting out. They hide away, and
yes,
then
then there's
there's
this bit where she introduces herself. She begins to learn a little bit about this guy. He's essentially a low scale time traveler with slightly shitty equipment, and she doesn't quite know what yet. But she knows that gun's out of juice because she knows the technology. so she knows she's safe from being shot. And they have a bit of banter back and forth.
Mhm.
Slightly disappointing scene, I'll be honest, because mind you, I'm saying that this episode and the glove slash slapping scene that we talked about earlier was the first of what a series of really epic scenes in this show. It really was. It was like a series of plays within a play. It was glorious. Anyway,
Mhm.
but this scene is slightly disappointing, where they introduce each other and get a it's the good versus the bad thing. Okay, fine. Moving on.
Yeah.
Um, yeah. So they now escape. She goes. Oh, we just missed. Oh, she waggles the sonic screwdriver toward him, and he goes, "Oh, what are you doing?" Um, in that exact voice, which was strange.
It's nice.
Um, and then walks off, and okay, they go and they escape, and then they go their separate ways. Right.
Mhm.
Then you cut to this scene, which is again another racial element because the sign as it scans down, you can't really see because it's slightly coloured out
Blurred
there, but
out.
the blurry white light at the bottom says whites only. It's just because I'm filming off a screen during the day,
Yeah.
it doesn't pick up some of the finer detail. But trust me, it says whites only. And as it pans down, Ryan, the black lad, says, "I'm getting rather sick of seeing that sign,"
Mhm.
because obviously he's seen that sign across town.
Yep.
Um, so they then break into one of the motel rooms, naturally,
As you do.
because it's good to encourage black people to commit crimes in Montgomery, Alabama, 1955. That's
Yeah.
solid thinking. Anyway, although it is mentioned that they're not allowed to be there, so it's it's sort of it's brought up, it's mentioned. So they're then talking about, oh, who is this guy? Why is he here? Blah blah blah. Then she starts writing on the wall in a
Right.
second.
I don't know if I got it.
If you scroll forward far enough,
Oh, there she is. Oh, yep. Uh, right
yeah, there we go.
there.
So they start writing down stuff they know about Rosa Parks to try and work out why he's here.
Mhm.
Um, yeah, Bradley Walsh, not Bradley Walsh, his name's Graham. The character's name's Graham. Says stop writing on the wall. That's vandalism or something. And then there's quite a funny joke actually, where she makes it's magic pen. She makes it disappear, and he says, "You're not Banksy," and she turns around and says, "Or am I?" Which is quite nice.
Yeah. Banksy, of course,
Yeah,
being a very famous anonymous graffiti artist who's, yeah,
or is he?
or is he or
Yeah,
she?
yes, he is. Yeah, but no, it's actually. I think we're aware that it is a he. I
Yeah,
think, but
but
maybe not. Who knows? Maybe it is a fuck time lord. I don't know. Anyway, a time lord who likes to build booby traps in his expensive
art.
paintings for some reason. Anyway, there we go. Um, yeah. So then you have a slight problem because the bar scene, when you pulled away, you saw a police car drive into the shot, and that's set up for this following scene, where a policeman arrives, knocks on the door. She has
Yeah.
to yeah, the two people of color have to go into the bathroom in order to hide because they're not allowed to be there. And then walks Officer Racist McFuckface.
There he is.
There he is. And this scene's actually really interesting in a number of ways because there's comic relief, there's some seriousness in there, there's tension because you think, well, hang on, is he going to find out that these non-white people are in this white people space?
Mhm.
And of course, because this is a bizarre, I'll let you into my secret. I watched this. I went round to my mum's house on Saturday or Sunday, whenever this was on, and I watched it with her. And at one point, when he comes in, he says, "Have you seen these two mongrels?" Referring to Yaz and Ryan, the two
Mhm.
people of color. And my mum actually audibly gasped, like
Really?
literally verbalized a gasp at that, which is quite nice. It's nice to know my mum isn't a racist. That's good.
Yeah.
I mean, I wasn't really fearing that she was, but it's nice to have it confirmed.
And again, we have this
Anyway,
sense of, sorry if I could just, I'll give you a break and I'll talk a little bit. The episode does a really good job of reminding you all the time, but not in your face, how much in danger the two people of color are. And also, I mean, by extension, but much less, the white people with them are committing social faux pas or transgressing social norms by being so friendly and connected with them. But one of the things that I did notice, and I think it did a really good job of, was to convey the oppressive nature of racism. Even when you don't have formalized um, laws that say it's okay to be racist. If you are having the police being called on you when you're mowing your lawn, or you're being followed when you go into a store, I mean, this is a explicitly racist society. But I can see now through this episode more of the day-to-day experience of how, the extra burden people of color have to bear because white people don't deal with this kind of crap. So
Well, this is actually a really poignant element of what is, I think, one of the defining social commentary scenes within this episode, which comes up in a second, as well. So we'll get to that in a second, though. Yes. So the police officer asks the doctor whether she's seen, and this is, again, I'm just quoting him. This is verbatim: a Negro boy and a Mexican girl. To which and this is how being an ally should work. This is how defending people should work. She says, and this is the exact wording: I don't recognize anyone by that description.
yeah.
Which is, in a way, denying that they're there, but denying that they're there because she's saying that I don't recognize that description of these people. Which is, I think, the correct way of going about that, because she's protecting them at first, but also denying that that's a valid way of describing human beings.
Yeah, double meaning there
That's,
in
again,
the words. Another
exactly.
firework.
Indeed, apologies. I promise you, I'm not driving through the hood or anything like that. I live in the hood. I'm hood to the core. Anyway, she also says, he says, are you sure they're not hiding in here? And she says, I'm not harboring anyone who doesn't have a right to be here.
Again.
Which, again, is saying these people have a right by just the fact that they're human beings to be here. And so it's a kind of
really
interplay
nice.
of the fact that you've got these two worldviews clashing there.
Yeah, it's really nicely done, and with
It is.
Yeah, a lot of thought.
It is, yeah. And then you get some comic
dialogue.
relief when. Oh, sorry. When you get some comic relief when, in a second, he turns around and asks what they're doing in town, and Graham steps up and pretends that they're a married couple who are pitching. And as he says, it's a telephone that takes pictures and is a calendar and sends letters. And he says, "What's your name, sir?" And he says, "My name's Steve Jobs," which is a really nice bit of sort of banter and played nicely. Although it's sort of hammed up to an extent, but that's, I mean, Bradley Walsh is a very good actor, but does comedy acting very well as well. Having started as a stand-up comic as well, you can kind of tell he's got the sort of comic timing and delivery. Oh yeah, he started as a yeah, it was a stand-up, and now he does TV presenting mostly, but he does acting. Like he played the lead in the British version of CSI. No, the one with dun dun.
Oh, the Law and Order.
Law and Order. There we go. He played the lead in that episode, in that series, and was very good, very good. Anyway, yeah. So he plays that bit of comedy off nicely, but it doesn't detract from the fact that it's a really tense situation. But essentially, what he's doing is buying time for, as you skip forward,
when he opens the door.
Oh, yeah, the police officer opens the door, finds that there was a problem loading the video. That's what he finds. No, he doesn't. He finds that there's no one in there. But even though we knew they went in there, and what you find out is that they've escaped to for fuck's sake. Is anything about this episode going to go well? Really?
No, I'm just refreshing it. It's fine. But
no, it's not fun. This is really annoying and stressful. This is ridiculous.
I'm sorry. You're doing a great job.
No, I'm not. No, I'm really not. But thank you. You're very kind. Oh, God almighty.
I'm listening.
Anyway, I'm going to take a drink.
And you're definitely doing a good job. So I can get us back. There's a problem unloading with the video.
Yeah, there is a problem loading. Never mind. We'll just have to talk through with no fucking images. Anyway, right. So the police officer finds that there's no one in there, and then it cuts to because there's basically a back alleyway with some dumpsters, some garbage cans, rubbish cans, whatever. And the two of them have escaped and are now crouched or sat on the floor behind those dumpsters, out of the sight of the police officer, who sticks his head out of the bathroom window to see if anyone's there. It then comes back to that, and he goes, "Okay, once your business is done here, get yourself out of Alabama," which is a kind of recurring thing where various of the characters tell them to get out of Alabama. which again is reinforcing the idea that it's not friendly to outsiders, be they even black people who were born there are seen as outsiders, sort of thing.
Mm-hmm.
Anyway,
And white people who don't follow the rules are also unwanted.
indeed so, because the police officer knows they are harbouring people of colour, as if that's a fucking crime. Although technically it was at the time, of course, but
At the property
morally
was.
speaking, it is as if that's a bad thing. But can't do anything about it because there's no evidence because they've escaped. Anyway, and then you get, like I say, one of the cornerstone touching moments of the episode, and you get to see, and it was especially a treat for me as a white person because it's a conversation that I rarely get to hear because I don't think people of color are naturally very comfortable talking in the way the two characters do in front of white people because it's not something they're going to understand because they don't experience it, and basically they go through lived experiences they have of the modern day racism with and juxtaposing that to 1950s racism. And it's a very, very touching scene, which, like I said, you should go and watch the episode. I can't really do it any semblance of justice because it's a genuinely beautiful moment.
Although I felt a little bit like it was. Did you find it was a little too much of a things are so much better now than they used to be? I mean, yes, in some ways, yes, but also in some ways, no. You know.
Yeah, I've literally written down as my note for this because this was the bit you were going to do, and so I was going to jump in and go, oh well, it's not all perfect, sort of thing.
Yeah.
Was that the Yaz, the female? I don't want to say. I keep trying because in the show they're called coloured. In my head, I'm thinking coloured, but I know that's not the phrase to fucking use.
Right.
The person of colour, Yaz, the young Pakistani British girl or woman. She says, think of it this way, it's bad for Rosa now, but in 53 years, they have a black president.
Yeah, as if, then racism goes away because there's a black president.
And I wanted to scream at the TV. Yeah, but in 61 years, they get Trump, so shut the fuck up. Well, that's not, that's not like, it's, oh God almighty, it's frustrating.
As much as I think that the episode had so many strings for it, that really felt like lines written by white people. You know, I don't know who the writers were.
Oh, well, actually, I do, because unlike you, Kristi, I decided to do research more than an hour before the fucking show. Anyway.
Normally, that's all I needed.
An hour is all you need. That's what she said.
Yeah.
It was written by Mallory Blackman and Chris Chibnall. Now, Mallory Blackman is, ironically, a black woman, actually. Yeah, and she's a children's writer, mostly, or young adult writer, whatever. And you can tell that she's able to frame those black experiences through her prism, if that makes sense, or through her viewpoint, which is quite nice. But also you have Chris Chibnall, who's a white guy, and so I think they wrote the episode pretty damn well. But there are elements where, like you say, I think it comes across as did a white person write this? Because it doesn't seem like it's enough. Although maybe not. Maybe we're viewing it through a white prism. Maybe actually there is a certain part of the black experience which would see it that way, or whatever. Like, I can understand wanting to see things through that slightly rose-tinted perspective, because it seems like dealing with this shit is so much easier when you can point to successes like the fact that Barack Obama became president within or just after Rosa's lifetime. So it's not it becomes easier to deal with the shit. And as she says, imagine what they'll be doing in 50 years after that, which, yeah, I mean, it could be a lot better.
But why isn't it 5 days?
It doesn't feel like it's going in that direction right now, but it could.
50 years? Why do we need 50 years for it? That's the question. It shouldn't have taken 50 years to have a black president.
Also, you've got to bear in mind that this character's a police officer, so not naturally inclined toward revolutionary ways of thinking.
Possibly. But it did feel a little too much like patting ourselves on the back. White people patting themselves on the back for the work of a black man.
Well, that's also another element of this story, actually, I wanted to ask you about and to give you an opportunity to talk and me an opportunity to not lose my voice.
Yeah, go ahead.
Was the potential for the fact that even though, like I say, the Doctor isn't actually by everyone else, is this an element potentially of white saviorhood complex and sort of paternalism whereby the what is the black success and heroism story of Rosa Parks is being enabled by the actions of a white person.
Yeah, I think, well, in this case, so there's a couple critiques that I could make. So give your voice a rest, have a drink of water or beer or whatever it is that you're drinking at your time.
Might have a crafty wank. I'm stressed.
Quick, we'll mute yourself then. Yeah, so a few things. 2 minutes.
No, you're going to hear every noisy, sweaty grunt.
All right, getting back to the actual episode. So a couple things that did come out that I had to quibble with. One, it wasn't when Rosa Parks did was not completely devoid of political awareness and context, and the idea that she just decided she was too tired that day. It was a deliberate strategy. If you go actually watch the Drunk History episode, they have little clips of this. But there's a Rosa Parks episode for Drunk History where they talk about the fact that there was actually a group of people discussing this and planning this, and the decision she made was actually set up beforehand. It was a political action. It wasn't on a whim, and it was part of a larger movement. But of course, for the tension in the episode, they made it out to be it was a series of circumstances that came together that it was a straw that broke the camel's back, and then Rosa just stood up and refused to sit where she was meant to sit or stand, I guess, because a white person was supposed to have that seat. And this, the reaction to her arrest started the movement that started the process to get the buses desegregated and brought in Martin Luther King. Well, the fact is that this was a planned political action. But at the time she gave the story, her feet were tired because otherwise I would imagine, I don't know this and I'd speculate, she gave that, her feet were tired, but it wasn't as spontaneous as it seemed because there was a lot of protests, a lot of planning going on behind the scenes already. There was a lot of networking with Black churches and the resistance to the oppression. So that was not historically accurate in that way, but it added to the tension of the
Yeah, but
episode.
although they do make a nod to that because there's at one point where Martin Luther King appears
Yes,
in
although
Rosa's house.
yeah, I don't know that he was actually there for that part of the planning. I would have to check the history on that. But again, for them in the story, it was really important to have these circumstances come together because it added tension. But this wasn't. If it wasn't going to be that night, it would have been another night, for her. So, but that would have ruined things. So I'll let them kind of slip with that historical inaccuracy.
You didn't remotely approach the topic I asked you about.
Oh, which one was that? The wank?
No, you can. We'll discuss that later. That's a private matter.
Oh, about the white
Um,
man student.
yeah,
Oh, right. Yes. Okay. So on that point, I think in this episode, it's actually would be considered not a bad example of allyship, which was the doctor, and of course, there's a whole interfering in history. But what the doctor and her companions were doing were acting in supporting roles so that Rosa could be the star of her political resistance. And so, even though it was the case, it was somebody undermining Rosa's opportunity, and they were working to counter the undermining. So, I think it was less about them rescuing Rosa. She didn't need rescuing, but they were trying to run interference on somebody else trying to run interference. And so, instead of solving the problems themselves or trying to do it a different way, they were kind of blocking her. They were letting her be the running back who was taking the ball across the touchdown line. So I think it
it's
could have
it's
been more
it's called the
heavy-handed than it
goal line.
was.
It's called the goal line. Don't.
Yeah. Across
It's
is it the goal line? I don't know. Well, anyway, into the end zone. There we go.
into the finish zone. Yes,
The finish zone.
I'm just messing with you now. Um,
What was your
yes.
take?
Anyway,
You felt it was too um, white
I
people
no, I
interfering?
think I agree with you. Actually, I think it was. Largely speaking, I think it was, like I say, a good piece of allyship. Like I said, the scene um, in the motel room where she's explaining to the police officer that she doesn't recognize that description, which is
Mhm.
in the way it's worded and all that. That's like I say, I think that's proper allyship, and the fact that they were buying time for the Yaz and Ryan to escape, which
Right.
again is facilitating and aiding in the protection of people in danger. So yeah, I think it was allyship rather than paternalism or anything like that. But it still just seems a bit weird. The optics of it are slightly odd. That it's oh, without these white people, maybe it's
Well,
white
to be
people that are
fair,
to
yeah, it
to
was
thank for Rosa Parks or whatever.
right.
Like it seems a bit odd.
Well, more, I think, like I said, I think, it was a white man. Well, it doesn't matter, but somebody's trying to interfere with Rosa's life. So they weren't really helping her so much as stopping him.
Yeah, they were
Yeah.
just allowing things to take their course.
Mhm. Yeah.
Anyway, back to the story because we're not
Oh.
even halfway fucking through. Um, yeah, yeah. So Ryan, the black lad, stalks Rosa essentially. He gets off the bus and follows her back to her house to find out because they need to find out all the details of her life and routine so they can protect the storyline integrity, equal events, right? Which, like you say, aren't really true to the history as it actually was, but just within this little, again, willing suspension of disbelief, you just go with it, that historical timeline. So he follows her back to the house, convinces her that he's not part of the police, and so she lets him in, where he meets Martin Luther King, who's in the house, and they're having like some sort of black rights meeting type thing.
Right. Yeah.
You don't actually get to hear what goes on inside that meeting, which may have been a deliberate time-saving device, but I'd like to think was also a matter of not letting you into that world, if that makes sense. Like that's their
Yeah.
own thing,
Right. Yeah.
which
Like
I thought was
that's.
quite a nice touch.
Mhm.
Although, like I say, it might just have been cut for time. Who knows? I mean,
Right.
maybe I'm reading too much into it. I
But
don't know.
there's also the sense that it's the people who are experiencing it, that have something, so they connect on that and work on it. And it's, yes, I get what you're saying. It could have just been
Yeah,
cut for
exactly.
time.
Like yeah,
But
we see enough in the episode of these kind of supposedly all white spaces that they allow them to have like an all black space that
mhm,
we're not allowed in, which is fair enough. Like I think within that time zone, within that event, yeah, I'm down with that. That's cool. But like I say, maybe I'm reading too much into it. Who knows? It's all about different opinions and stuff. It's art, anyway. Yes. So what? After that, the doctor confronts Krasko, the baddie, at the bus station again. De-arms him rather sneakily, and takes away his ability to time travel. Um, because she's worked out that he was a part. He was a. It seems an escaped prisoner, or that's never quite well defined. In fact, the entire baddie character Cresco is never really defined properly at all. It was
no, he's some sort of
quite two
criminal.
dimensional.
Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. But which makes me think they're not. He's not going to be making a comeback in the series at any point because they didn't
Mm,
flesh him out at
yeah.
all. Yeah.
No, he's not like a Captain Jack when he comes
No,
on.
he's definitely not. Apologies. I'm going to have to open the door because the cat's being a twat.
Yeah, no worries at all. But while you're gone, I can also say I've looked up online, and you guys can type in after the show, of course, Drunk History, Claudette Colvin, and Rosa Parks. It's a small clip from the larger Drunk History show. But yeah, it was actually Claudette Colvin was a woman who was almost the Rosa Parks. It was almost her who was going to sit down, but then things changed. Now I can't remember all the details because I watched it a long time ago, but you can definitely go check out that little clip on YouTube of Drunk History about Rosa Parks. So
Yes. So anyway, the badly fleshed out baddie character, you find out that he was from a prison, which is supposedly one of the maximum security prison this side of the universe. And he's there because he killed a couple of thousand people. Although again, it's not fleshed out as to whether this had a racial motivation to it or not, and quite how that went down. But anyway,
because you end up getting some racial dialogue, racist, I should say, not racial, racist dialogue from him later on. But that motivation for him, you're right, it's very unclear and not very well brought out.
yeah. Well, you get it. Well, the next line, isn't it? Is she manages to winkle out of him that he wants to affect this timeline because he says this is where it all started to go wrong. So he's a white supremacist piece of garbage. Is the basic motivation why he's there, and why he's trying to fuck with the Rosa Parks timeline. Apologies. Yeah. So, but the reason that because he's been in 1955 for quite a while, and we find out, although the doctors managed to work this out before, it seems, the reason he hasn't just killed Rosa is because he can't. At this maximum security prison, they put in a chip in his head, and I noted down the thing. It was called a cerebral restrictor. It's a chip that they've planted in his head, which means he can't kill or harm a living thing. So he's just attempting to nudge the timeline slightly so that things go out of whack. She doesn't stand up. And again, like you say, you have to sort of suspend your disbelief because even though it's historically inaccurate within this version of time zone, it's accurate.
Right.
And so he thinks that he can stop the civil rights movement and keep, as he calls them, their kind in their place. And this is where you get the element of sexism that I mentioned earlier, because the only two people he really tries to hurt or interfere with, really, in this series are both women, or in the show, I should say, are both
Yeah,
women.
that's true.
One being Rosa Parks, and the other being the Doctor, because when she smashes his, he has like a wristband type device which allows him to travel forward and back in time, and he gets angry and grabs her by the throat. It's quite a visceral scene. But the chip kicks in and he can't actually go through and do anything. But it's still, he wants to enact violence on women. And I think that's a rather clever and subtle way of having within inside that story that with racism and white supremacy comes sexism and comes violence towards women.
Can we do a diversion and talk about the recent allegations that were released in the news today to tie this together to real life?
If you so wish. If you so
Yeah.
wish.
Well, Richard Spencer's estranged wife, they're going through the process of a divorce, has made allegations that he was abusive. And we'll see where that comes from or goes to. But we know that white supremacy is not just about race, it's about male supremacy.
Yeah.
So
Well, you
it's a
clearly, I know you were traveling between continents, but clearly you haven't watched my channel because I did a video on this.
okay. Oh, yeah. So why don't you talk about the contents of your video since you are up on this, Mr.
I
Logan?
am up on this. White supremacy and sexism together, and that's my wheelhouse.
A
Not that I'm a
patriarchy,
white
really.
supremacist
Yeah.
sexist. I mean, I understand these people. I chronicle these fucking assholes. Yes, Richard Spencer, his wife's filing for divorce. He claims that she physically and emotionally, or he physically and emotionally abused her. And even though he denies the claims, there are screenshots of text messages and emails and so on that have been released from court files, which show that he, at the very least, seems to react in a way that suggests that he knows he's guilty. Like in one of them, he says, she says to him, "My jaw is bruised," and she's not prepared to talk to him. And he says, "I understand. I'm sorry. I feel terrible." Now, if someone says to you, "You're physically bruised," and you weren't the one that bruised them,
Hmm.
you'd go, "Well, how did you get bruised? What happened to you?" Or something like
Yeah.
that. He punched her in the face. That's
If
what
yeah,
happened.
I would say I feel bad for you, or I wish I could do something to help, but I feel terrible.
Yeah, he
Mm.
physically assaulted her, and not just that, but in a really odd twist, because these people are constantly going about white genocide. Um, he endangered the life of his as yet at the time unborn child by attempting to punch her in the face when she was 9 months pregnant.
As she alleges in her court documents.
She alleges, yes, but I mean,
Yeah, yeah, we
like I
have,
say,
yeah.
these messages are pretty fucking damning. I mean, at one point,
Hmm.
she describes an adventure they went on down his staircase, which it seems was he pulled her out of bed by the hair and dragged her down the stairs. Yeah, I mean, horrific, absolutely horrific, and I believe absolutely because, like I say, these messages are pretty corroborating, and there are photos of them. Apparently, they haven't been released, but they're in the court files of her wrists with severe bruising. It's if you put all of those pieces together,
Mm-hmm.
it fits the absolute normal pattern of what a domestic
Yeah,
abuse case is.
yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah,
So
yeah. I
it's
don't want
yeah,
to
that's
like say that
disgusting.
she's not credible. I just want to say there's a difference between this is her allegations, and I'm not saying don't believe her because they're allegations. Just saying that, and it's not
For
just
legal
believing her.
reasons.
It's
Yeah.
also the physical evidence. It's the text message. It's all of it. Yeah, it points to that the court would
Yeah.
probably. We'll see how it happens in the court, but if the court has reason to find for her. So.
Yeah. Yeah.
Mhm.
Don't be surprised if they do because it seems pretty I don't know if it's necessarily conclusive enough for a court because obviously the level of proof needed is pretty severe. Which is, understandable, but
But for divorce proceedings,
yeah,
yeah,
exactly. Yeah. Yeah. So we'll have to wait and see how that goes. But yes, um, white supremacy, racism,
violence.
bigotry begets bigotry, and yeah, it's uh, they're inextricably linked.
Anything that has a
I defy you to show me a white supremacist. Sorry.
I was gonna say when you have an ideology of supremacy, it sort of implicitly assumes that anyone who tries to threaten your supremacy could be put down violently because you're in the right and they're in the wrong. So you can use violence to
Mm,
protect your status, whether it's your male status or your white status. You know, you can use violence because you are superior.
yeah,
That's
yeah,
the mindset,
and
and that's
it's
why it's a
yeah,
thing.
show me a white supremacist who wasn't also a misogynist. I've
Mm.
yet to see one, and I've studied a lot of white supremacists. They don't exist. Basically, is the point.
No,
They're
no, it's part and
inextricably
parcel.
linked together.
Patriarchy is part of white
Yeah,
supremacy. It's just
and yeah, and to return to the Doctor Who thing, like I say, the fact that he's seeking to fuck with a woman
women.
specifically, right? Because he could have chosen any number of different times throughout the civil rights movement to go there and do something. The fact that he decides it's this, he has to attack a woman, and he tries to physically assault the Doctor, who he perceives to be a woman,
Mhm.
even though he may know otherwise. But it's still viscerally a man with his hand around the neck of um, a woman. I think that rather cleverly ties in those strands without
Yeah,
necessarily overtly saying it. It's there.
right. It shows a link without pointing to it and go, "Hey, here's a link."
Yes, exactly. Exactly. It would be, I think, quite distracting if they had like an arrow coming from the side with "this is sexism as well." Like that would be.
Oh, don't
Then that
give
would.
Carl ideas of things to complain about.
Well, I'm surprised if he doesn't make a video about this because it's the Woms and the blacks
Mm,
getting uppity.
mm,
It's that, isn't it?
yeah.
Um, Yeah, and so you and again, there are quite subtle epic scenes in there in the episode as well because if there's following on from that, um, they have to, like I said, they have to try and find out her routine so that they can keep it the same for the following day, or at least roughly the same, so that she gets on the bus, does her protest, and the civil rights movement continues. The timeline is unbroken. And so they go down again. And she doesn't find this strange that these random foreigners who've gotten on the
Right.
bus
Yeah.
that she met earlier in the episode who were having a physical fracas in the street. Yeah, bizarre. Anyway, um, and there's a touching scene where Yaz is allowed because on the buses they have to get on, put their coin at the front, and then the coloured folk have to get off the bus and go and join the bus again at like a door
A
halfway along.
separate door. Right. A
Yeah,
second door.
which the coloured people have to go through. Only the whites may enter from the front and sit at the front. That's the thing. And Yaz, who is perceived as Mexican um,
By some.
by some, um, but clearly isn't black as such. But she's not white passing particularly either. But she's allowed at the front, and so they have this brief discussion. But it's quite good in terms of elucidating a certain fact about the way in which, especially women of color, are treated. Even when they're not being racially um, viewed through that racial lens, they're often just ignored or erased from the situation. That
Mhm.
it's not that she's been given the affirmation of being allowed in the white seats. She's essentially slipped through the net unseen, which is
Yeah.
not great for a person either, really. And so she has this brief discussion with the two white characters because the black guy has to go and stand at the back because he's obviously black,
Right.
whereas she gets to sit there and says, "Well, do I have to go at the back or can I sit here?" And so she decides to sit there, but it's
Even though
uneasy,
she's not white,
even though she's not white, no, but
Caucasian.
she's not necessarily perceived as black.
Right.
And as they said, yeah, there's a point that's made. There are not many of Pakistani heritage here, which I imagine
Mhm.
1950s Montgomery, Alabama,
No.
probably wasn't
No.
Pakistani heritage people there. Um,
But it's a
anyway,
sort of a subtle poke at that thing that gets brought up a lot of times when white supremacists get asked questions, which is where do you draw the line around white? Who is white and
yeah,
why?
exactly. Yeah.
And this it kind of brings that question up. She's like, "Well, I'm not white, but I was allowed in on the front. So where do I?" And putting by making everything about white, non-white, or black, and whatever. These categories are
Yeah.
completely arbitrary, and they're
Well,
about
indeed, yeah,
perception, not about reality.
exactly, yeah, because she's actually of darker skin than Rosa Parks, both
Mm,
in reality and the actress who plays her. Yeah, which is, they had all kinds of strange rules about, like in Black South Africa, they had the pencil test or whatever, where if your hair was thick enough where if you put a pencil in it, it held, you were perceived as black. That was too black, and so you weren't allowed in white areas. What kind of arbitrary
What?
bullshit is that?
Yeah,
Because I've got
completely.
really thick hair, I
Yeah.
would pass as black. And yet I'm the whitest motherfucker you've ever seen. It's ridiculous. Like it's so unscientific and so shit. It's
Mhm.
ridiculous. Anyway, um, yeah. So so they have to go. Hang on, where am I? I've totally lost where I am in my fucking notes now, and my
Oh.
handwriting is dreadful. Anyway, so yeah, Graham, who is a bus driver or was a bus driver back in 2018, Earth, goes to meet James Blake. No, hang on, what's his
James
name?
Blunt? What?
Not James Blunt. James Blake, who's the name of the bus driver, who was the actual real historical bus driver who did actually do the deed. And so I don't know quite why them being bus drivers would naturally give them a rapport, but it did apparently. And so they start playing pool, and they have the brief conversation about. He says, "Oh, but in England you don't have to separate coloureds from whites," and he says, "No, we don't do that." And he asks him about whether he agrees with that, and Blake tells a lie, although it's not necessarily seen as a lie straight away, where he says, "Oh, it's just the law; it's never going to change," as if he's not an active
Yeah.
part of that.
Right.
Which is then revealed later to be complete nonsense, because one of the what happens is, because Krasko hasn't got his weapons anymore, so he can't interfere in any kind of violent sense, although he's stopped from doing that anyway, but he then starts to try and scupper their plans to keep the timeline going. Like he destroys the bus, he changes all the bus timetable signs to say that they're all cancelled. He tries to make sure that the plan doesn't go off, and so he
And
can just nudges history enough to stop the timeline. And what happens is that he changes the rota so that James Blake isn't driving that bus that day. He has the day off.
yeah,
And so
he's off
James Blake
doing
goes
something.
to fishing. And so, um, not Greg, what's his fucking name now? I've totally forgotten. Graham Iron, white man and black man, go to the creek to say to James, to essentially scare him off to go back to work by telling him that there's going to be a sit-in protest, which
Right.
there isn't one planned or anything. Not in this timeline. Obviously, there was in reality, but anyway. And you see that he says, "Not on my bus." So clearly, he's saying it's not just because it's the rules; it's because I'm actually a racist prick.
Right.
So he
I'm
was
gonna
lying to
enforce
Graham
this.
in the bar earlier in the episode,
And you
which
see
is
this,
often.
yeah, a
Sorry, go
lot.
on.
Well, I would say you see a lot of people who say, "Oh, well, there's no discrimination in the law, so we don't have these problems anymore." But really, it comes down to their apathy. And in this case, as you point out, he was saying, "Oh, it's the law; it's whatever it is. It can't be changed." But what it's not being changed because people like him on the inside don't want it to change.
Yeah,
And that's
indeed,
where,
absolutely.
yeah,
And of course, and you see it later on, and we'll get to it in a second. But it's it's not just those who are on the inside who don't want it to change, but people who apathetically stand by and allow it to happen, like
yeah,
the people on the bus, none of whom stood up and defended her. I mean, I can understand to a degree that black folks not doing it, because if you stand up to the police officer in Montgomery, Alabama, 1955, it's very likely you're going to swing from a fucking tree.
yeah,
But none of the white folks did either,
yeah.
and
But
they've got no excuse really, other
well,
than social pressure.
yeah, they're all basically fine living under a racist system.
Yeah, absolutely.
And that was the reality of 95, 90. I mean, I'm making up numbers here, but people in the South, I didn't feel, looking at the numbers of people on the march, that there was a really big contingent of Southern whites who really wanted Black liberation. It felt like there were Northern kids who came down, and activists from the 60s who were sort of they took themselves to the South to get involved. But the institutions of racism were so deep and so ingrained and so unquestioned that I'm not familiar with that many, you know, active white civil rights groups, especially before it really kind of turned into a national movement, when it was still underground like this, when it was still organizing at the very grassroots level.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely, absolutely. Yeah. So, in order to try and keep the timeline going, the doctor rips her coat so that she can go to Rosa Parks, who was a seamstress, and leave Yaz with her and the coat to make sure that she leaves work on time to get on the right bus. Right, that's the setup for this bit. And then there's another iconic scene, one of the many iconic scenes, where Yaz and Rosa are talking about life, really. And Rosa explains that she wanted to be a teacher, but that didn't work out. Not because of racism necessarily, just because of poverty, which I suppose is linked to racism, but it's not really mentioned specifically. It's the fact that her grandma got ill or something. Anyway, but that's a setup to the bit where Yaz is explaining that she's the police back in England, like she's in the police force, and Rosa is absolutely stunned by this.
Right.
Absolutely stunned, and it brings home actually one story, and it's sport related, but it's definitely race and time specifically related as well. Bill Russell, who played for the Boston Celtics back in the 50s and 60s, black guy, one of the first great black basketball players of his ever, really, because before then they didn't allow blacks in. And his dad, when he went into the locker room and saw that the black guys and white guys were showering together in the locker room, like they were on an equal footing, his father broke into tears. Literally, he couldn't. He come from such a time, because then they ran from the south as well, where whites and blacks were not equal at all, in any fucking sphere whatsoever. They were not equal, and so to see white and black even showering together on the same team as equals made a grown man break into tears, and that really, for me, brought home just how downtrodden, and it was absolutely fucking oppression on a monumental level that black people suffered in America.
Yeah.
And that only officially came to an end in 1968, and for a large extent still remains.
The informal structures don't go away because you pass a law.
Yeah, exactly. You know, we mentioned him earlier, but Donald Trump, the man who, illegitimately or not, is the president of the United States, was twice sued by the federal government for racist letting practices in his buildings.
He was giving
racism hasn't gone away.
Yeah, he was giving an
It's
award
still in power
to a Mexican American, and as he was the Mexican American or Hispanic American, I don't know his particular national origin, was approaching the podium, Trump says, and he speaks perfect English.
Which I can, yeah, exactly. He's incredibly racist, but what a great response it would have been if he turned around to him and said, "Yes, I speak better English than you."
Well, that would have been better, but yes. And this is
which is not difficult to do necessarily, because Donald Trump doesn't speak in complete sentences, which is pathetic. But even so, it would have been a great response. Yeah. But there we go.
Yeah, but you know, I mean, having a shower on equal terms, that's not enough. That's the bare minimum.
No, no, exactly. But that's the thing. Yeah. That really basic act made a grown man who has a family and, you know, incredibly successful son. He broke into fucking tears.
But
imagine that.
But we as white people can't kind of pat ourselves on the back and go, "Okay, problem solved."
No, absolutely. No, I didn't bring that up as like, oh, America's changed for the. No, it's like it's come from such a low place that even that really basic shit made a man fucking cry.
Yeah,
in public. Like, and I'm guessing a man that grew up in 1930s Southern America, or Southern United States, didn't cry in public very often. Like, that wasn't the thing they wanted to be doing, you know. Anyway, but yeah, so I bring that up as an aside. But anyway, yeah. So yeah, the fact that this Asian woman was in the police force was just stunning to Rosa, as it would be. Of course, it would be, because black people didn't get into the police force. I mean, there aren't that many now, obviously, but then they were literally banned from being in really any position of authority.
Yeah, and they're actually being like sort of turned. MI6 wouldn't even hire them.
Indeed,
people who weren't white, or were very reluctant to. Yeah. So anyway,
yes, and then you get
this today in Britain.
Yeah.
Despite Carl being the vulnerable minority.
He is, yes. He's a delicate flower. Absolutely. You then get a scene which is slightly odd, and again was an opportunity to flesh out the bad guy character, because it wasn't absolutely integral to the story, so you could have lingered on it slightly, where Ryan is trying to make sure that the passengers are getting on the bus so that it's full enough so that Rosa has to be asked to stand, and therefore the protest can happen. And so he's running along, changing like the bus timetables and stuff, trying to make sure that the route goes normally. Indeed. He runs into Cresco, who has parked a car in the road to block the bus in order to try and stop the timeline, right? and he says, move out of the way. You're not going to win this. And he says, he turns to him and says, no, this isn't going to happen because you're and this the protest isn't going to happen, and your kind aren't going to get above themselves. And he
Mhm.
says, your kind, yeah, your kind, and he obviously means black people
Yeah.
because he's a very racist person. And now at that point, it would have been, I think, quite good for him to ask him, well, what the fuck's your problem with black people? And then you could have had the bad guy explain in his own words his issue, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
Like that you could have fleshed out the character without
A bit
really
more.
affecting the storyline in any way, but
Yeah.
still giving a more 3D rounded quality to the bad guy character, which I thought would have added something to it. But
Can I build on
even
that?
so,
I think that's a really good point because one of the things that isn't discussed is the motivations behind the racism. I mean, you see it all over. You see the animus and you see the hostility and the desire to oppress, but it's not really given a characterization. It's not really given a voice. You see, the police officer, all these people are participating in the system, but you're right. I think here, if they could have like gotten to the root of what's wrong with racism, the miscalculation that's happening. Maybe they could have used that to give a little more context to the character and also context to the idea. Maybe they could have had something about how racism is actually, it can be timeless if you let it be. Like, or you can evolve beyond it. So that they could have, I think you're right, made him a bit more of a foil for the storyline there.
they could have done. But what the only thing I will give them as a get out of jail free card, so to speak, on that is that maybe they felt that they didn't want it to be misconstrued as giving like a bombastic platform to a racist to spew justification for their racism, if that
Possibly.
makes sense. Like
Yeah.
they didn't want it necessarily to be sullied in that way because regardless of how well you write it, there are going to be some racists who will watch it and say, "Oh yeah, I agree with the
Eh,
racist."
yeah,
you know,
yeah,
so and you don't want that to be too bombastic, or like if the actor gives a particularly great performance, it might seem like actually the racist is winning the war of words there, or
yeah,
something. So I can understand that to a degree, but it would have been nice to see the character fleshed out, and like you say, give the full, well, not even the full, because obviously it's a massive issue, but to give some context, some depth to why the racism is there, rather than just saying it's there, which
yeah.
they did very well.
Mhm.
It's a lot of light is, pardon me, shone on the fact that it is a very racist and overtly racist society, but it's never really explained why that is or necessarily how it's sustained in a number of ways. But
Mhm.
anyway, maybe I'm asking for too much for what is, like you say, it's family entertainment.
Yeah,
So
yeah.
maybe a
We're
political treatise
definitely
on the nature of oppressive, race
family.
relations is
Yeah,
probably a little much for a Saturday night entertainment show,
yeah.
possibly. Anyway, what then happens is the what was it called again? It was the temporal displacement weapon, which the doctor gets hold of, which was originally Krasko's, has been redistributed. Let's say, let's give the socialist term. It was redistributed by Ryan to himself, and he then if he says, if you like the past so much, why don't you go really deep into the past, and sends him as far back in time as the machine will allow him, which is like thousands and thousands of years, um, and beams him way into the past. So he's no longer there. He's no longer in 1955. He then gets in the car, drives it to wherever, so it's out of the way of the bus, and the story continues. Yes. So what then happens? Oh yeah, and also actually a bit I noticed, which isn't really relevant to this particular episode, but I think will be a running pattern in the series, is that you see Ryan, who's not he's not the smartest kid in the world, and clearly he's aware of how Yaz and the Doctor, and to an extent Graham, because of his experience in life, are more knowledgeable on certain things, and he's not very confident. So he seeks the affirmation of the characters around him. And at that moment where he does that good thing of sending the baddie out, deep into the past, and is able to get the car out of the way, he does a weird thing where he speaks to himself and says, "Good job, Ryan. Yeah, thanks, Ryan," and then gets in the car. So essentially, because none of the
Yeah,
other cast, none of the
we're
other
there.
set of friends are there, he has to give himself the affirmation that he wants from the other characters if they had been there, if that makes sense, which is
And
quite nice.
yeah, and actually, I think that's a good practice. So often, our internal dialogues, people's internal dialogues, can be so negative, and we don't congratulate ourselves or do that kind of things to boost ourselves up, and we're perfectly capable. And I don't say do it to the point of egotism, but when you do something well, if nobody's all there to watch it, be like, yeah, good on you. Yeah. So
And
yeah.
so, and I was going to say, I mean, it must have been a culture shock because even though he says in the episode he experiences racism today, to go back to 1955 Alabama, it must have been a culture shock to him, and it must have been quite depressing as a black person. So
Oh yeah.
again, to have that little pick me up was probably a nice, pleasant experience for him,
Mhm.
even though he did it himself. But even so,
One thing that if
um,
I could jump in and give your
yeah,
voice a break is to say that the other storyline that's going on is inside the bus. So as Kevin has pointed out, the baddie is going around changing timetables and trying to get the bus empty enough so that there aren't enough seats that Rosa's sorry, there are not enough empty places that Rosa has to just be displaced and pushed back so that more whites can sit down. And so while these inter scenes are like these scenes are cutting in between, like Rosa at her job, or Ryan confronting the baddie, you've got this building tension of there aren't enough people on the bus currently to force the situation that is the tipping point.
yeah, it's like Speed, but instead of the speed of the bus, it's the number of people getting on the
Passengers,
bus.
right, right.
Yeah.
And actually, I think this is again the way they worked it into allyship and the way they tied this up ended up being quite nice and another form of allyship. So now that I've set up this building tension of the bus being too empty, but I'm sorry, what's the name of the police officer again? I know
Police
Ryan and
officer.
Graham, and who's the woman? Who's the police officer? The British police officer?
Oh, Yaz.
Yaz, yes. So Yaz and the doctor and Graham are sitting on the bus waiting and watching as people are coming on, noticing how empty it still is. And then I'll turn it back over to you.
Indeed, they do. But through their efforts, it's full enough, but not quite, because the doctor does some seat counting and realizes that they don't want to be a part of the history because they're trying to avoid changing the history in any way, or as much as they can anyway. But if they get off the bus, the seats that they free up mean that Rosa isn't there asked to move. So she realizes that they have to stay on the bus and be a part of it. And it's a really brilliant piece of facial acting by Bradley Walsh, actually, because you really feel for him. Because you should explain, it popped from time to time. He was, like I say, he was with Ryan's grandmother, who herself was black, and she was a big sort of civil rights
The power of
person, right?
Rosa,
She was,
right?
yeah, exactly, the power of Rose and all of that, right? Was clearly a very fiercely passionate woman about this subject matter, and the fact that Graham had been with her clearly meant that he had some passion about that as well. It was, was very, an ally of that sort of thing.
Right.
Otherwise, they couldn't have really gotten on. You would
Hmm.
imagine. If he been a KKK member, I don't think she'd have gotten on with him, to be
No.
honest. But there we go. Yeah, and so you see this moment of absolute like not epistemic,
Fundamental. Moral.
existential anguish in his face, where she says, "No, we're going to have to stay on and not help her."
So just to point this
And it,
out, I mean, I'm sorry to interrupt again, but I think this is
yeah, go on.
really, really important because throughout the episode, the white characters have been standing in alliance as much, without getting themselves arrested with the non-white or the people of color in the episode. So you know what side they're on, and because of this, when they sit down and they decide that they have to stay on the bus, they have to be part of the racist problem to be part of the solution. They actually have to like participate. And this is why I think it was important. They had to consciously participate in an oppressive system in that moment in order to start a process to stop it, but they still had to participate. They still had to sit by and let that happen. And so it really does gear you up psychologically and emotionally for the confrontation because now, because you're sort of seeing the world through the doctor, now you're on the bus too with her. You're part of the process, and especially if you're white, you're like realizing, what would I do in that situation? And of course it's a TV show and it's fiction, but I think it was, for me, I was very morally gripped not only by the character emotions of the people of color, but in this particular instance, by putting white bodies, well, not Yaz, but putting the two white bodies as part of the racist system, I thought was a really powerful way to make them part of the story without making them the story.
Yeah, exactly. Absolutely, yes. Yeah, it was profoundly uncomfortable
Yeah,
watch as a white person because, like you say, you realize that. I mean, they obviously want to help, but they know they can't.
right.
But in many ways, they're in a worse dilemma, of course, because they want to help but can't. But it's sort of aligned in a sense with the people that might think that the racial segregation was wrong, but still did fuck all about it,
Hmm.
who are just as guilty, frankly, as those who are actively complicit in it because they're not doing anything to stop it.
Right.
And the fact that it makes you analyze ways in which maybe through white privilege you've gained in a way that maybe you didn't even see that it was a problem, if that makes sense.
Hmm. Yeah.
And I thought it was, like I say, very powerful and very uncomfortable. But that
Yeah.
actually part
It
of the
should
reason,
be.
that part of the way you grow is by feeling those uncomfortable things because
Yeah.
it should be uncomfortable. If you're comfortable in that scenario, you're not a decent human being.
Right. Or you're not invested in the story. And I think the fact that it was like I realized they were going to make the doctor sit on the bus. I was really stunned, but that just shows how much the story, I mean, yeah, there are flaws or whatever else, but at that point I was so invested in the story, that I did feel uncomfortable at the thought of it, but I also understood it was completely necessary. So just that as a plot device, I thought was really, yeah, very clever. This episode really takes you on an emotional roller coaster with the
Yeah, well,
characters.
like I say, the look on Graham's face was a brilliant
Yeah.
piece of. It was a brilliant piece of directing, the way it was timed, and a brilliant piece of acting because he's not actually saying anything. He's just stood there, and the look on his face of just, like I say, sort of existential anguish and dread because he realizes he's stuck between an incredibly rocky place and an incredibly hard place because he
Yeah.
doesn't want to be a part of this. He hates it, but he realizes that's actually worse if he gets up and leaves because then the civil rights movement doesn't happen as it needed to.
Right.
So he's basically stuck in this horrible situation,
And
and
I
so you
yeah.
really feel for him.
Mhm. Yeah.
Yeah. So anyway, yeah, James Blake then calls the police. They come and arrest her, and there's a touching moment where Rosa looks up at Ryan, who's staring out the window, and they share a knowing look, and she nods at him, almost as if she's passing the flame down through the generations.
I think that's where I started blubbing.
Oh, bless you, bless you. Ah, yes. And that's the end of that particular story. They then cut to the TARDIS, where they're discussing it, and they discuss the pros and cons, like the fact that it was really hard for Rosa after that, even though things
Yeah.
got better. Like the segregation ended about a year later, slightly more than a year later. But that Rosa lost her job, her husband lost her job, and it was really difficult. But then, she got the what is it
National
called?
medal. National
The
medal of
National Medal, yeah, the highest civilian honor that America can bestow on a person by President Clinton. As if she had to wait that fucking long. Jesus.
Yeah.
Anyway, um, and as if she was still alive. Good on her. Fucking hell.
Yeah, in the 90s.
Because she wasn't massively young in the 50s either. Like she was,
No.
she was a happily married woman at the time. Anyway, yes. So, but then quite a lovely moment, which is actually true. I found out. The doctor says Rosa changed the world, but not just that. She
Mhm.
changed the universe,
And then
and
I
opens
started,
the door to the TARDIS. Did you blub again? Did you?
oh,
Oh, bless you.
waterworks.
She says, asteroid 284996. Yes, I noted the number down. I'm a geek. Leave me alone. Um, also known as Rosa Parks, which is actually true. That asteroid does exist, and it is named after Rosa Parks. She did change the universe, albeit from the perspective of humanity.
Yeah, from the Earthians
Yeah.
yeah, for us. Yeah.
And then it's seen, and then the end credits and the advertisement for the next one, which is about mental spiders, which is fun.
Which is a slightly different direction for the
I
next
mean,
one.
it might be a good episode, but I don't think we're going to be doing a happy hour on mental Spiderland. I don't think that one's going to be quite as moving or touching in a historical or racial sense.
Probably not.
unless
No.
unless the spiders turn out to be the KKK and it's all a big euphemism and it's a drug-fueled fucking social experiment. Oh god, if that happens, we're doing an
Oh,
episode.
Yeah, well, if it's just gonna be, PC Doctor Who, we'll have to do an episode every week. No, I feel like this is a was this the first episode of the new season?
No, it's the
Okay.
third, second, third. Oh bollocks!
Yeah.
I've totally lost track. I think it's the third. Yeah,
Okay, alright. Yeah,
yeah,
I haven't been able to watch them except, Kevin very kindly allowed me gave me
yeah.
the
I'm not doing
insight.
this shit every week. Fuck's
No,
sake.
no, no. No. Well, what I could probably do is, get online with you and ask you to screen share while you watch it on your iTunes or on the iPlayer. That's how I would ask you to do it, but, um,
Oh yeah,
yeah.
we can do that. Yeah.
Alright, we'll have to do an
Yes, I
off-air
will.
Doctor
I'll say
Who.
publicly now. I'll say publicly now to the BBC. I will be knowingly sharing your content without your prior written permission. So stick that in your pipe.
Well,
I
yeah, I
pay my
did pay
fucking
my
TV license,
yeah,
so
I paid my TV license for years, but, um,
indeed you did. Indeed you did. You square.
yeah.
Jesus. What kind of student pays a fucking TV license, for God's sake?
Yeah. There was a point that I wanted to make about this, and now it slid away because we started talking about other fun things. But damn it! It had to do with this episode, and now it's gone. Oh
Was
well.
it that racism is bad? Because I think we covered that bit.
Oh, I think it had to do with oh, this was it. I was going to switch it to stupid Stephen Moffat. He was saying
Ah, yes.
that the viewership is down, compared like, when he didn't say this, but the article so in an article, they talked about Stephen Moffat's opinion about this, which we'll talk about in a minute, but one of the things that they mentioned in the article was the overall number of viewers were down, but I have to ask how many people watch it on the iPlayer later, or how many
Yeah.
people by word of mouth go back and watch it on the iPlayer, so I don't really think you can take nightly viewing figures as the metric it used to be. You have to combine this with online viewing and consumption as well, which the
And
article
and
didn't talk
also you've got to bear in mind, you're going from Peter Capaldi, who was a well-known, well-established,
about. Mhm.
actor who'd already was already a part of the sort of, story, to someone who was far less well-known and a new doctor.
So should we bring up the Stephen Moffat? I'll just so Stephen Moffat's criticism of the new Doctor Who is that it's not as flashy and professional looking compared to new Netflix series. And he thinks that because Doctor Who brings in so much money, that the Doctor Who series should be able to take that money that they get from sales for the BBC and use it to make the show more expensive. And what Stephen Moffat hasn't figured out yet is that it's not about how it looks. It's about whether or not you care about the characters. This episode, I imagine, was not that expensive to film. It was a
No.
hotel room, it was a bar, it was a deserted old warehouse area, it was the inside of buses. And yet I was crying. And that's the point of entertainment. It's to move us. And he hasn't figured out that it's not about the
Yeah.
shiniest, newest, most expensive tricks. You have to connect to the human emotion,
Yeah,
and he doesn't
he's a
get that.
hack. He's a
Yeah,
hack for a start, because if you have to rely on special effects, you're not a good
exactly.
TV producer. And secondly, which I would argue he basically isn't anyway, but whatever. Um, and secondly, Doctor Who made its name being the most
Yes.
ineptly created, shoddily produced piece of old crap. But the stories were intriguing, the
Yeah.
characters you cared about. It was brilliant. Now, I would expect that a modern TV production on the scale that Doctor Who is going to be slightly better than the really, really ropey old sets they used to
Yeah,
film
yeah,
the
yeah.
old
They don't
ones
need
on in the 60s and
cardboard
70s.
anymore.
Exactly, yeah, and
They
monsters
can
that
do
were
with
clearly just a
styrofoam.
man with a bucket on his head that had been painted green.
Yes.
Um, and indeed the Daleks, which are really shitly designed, but they're an endearing part of the series,
Yeah.
even though they are remorseless
They're
murderers.
they're
Anyway,
defeated by stairs.
yeah, defeated by well, I always thought that was a bit of a con in the new one, that they can fly.
Yeah, that's
Bollocks to that. I
yeah.
like the fact that they were really shit. Anyway, so yeah, it has to be a bit slightly better than that. But the Doctor Who fans are not going there for big flashy shit,
No.
because if you were, then you wouldn't have ever gotten into it in the first place.
I mean, it is
It's
about the
not like it
adventure.
built its back on being shoddy,
Yeah,
and so the fact that it's now professionally produced is really good.
yeah. But it's
That's
still
all it needs to be.
yeah, about the story and the characters and the adventure. And, the doctor doesn't solve problems by smashing people or shooting them dead. He or she is they're witty and clever, or they save the day somehow. It's about saving the day. It's like Superman, off to save the day, just back from save the day, off to save the day again. That's what the Doctor is, and you don't need stupid like stop motion whatever effects with cameras and expensive lighting equipment. If you could just tell a story with characters that people care about.
Yeah. The only special effects they used in this was the blue gun
Yeah,
thing. But other than that, like you say, it's the inside of a bus,
yeah,
which takes up about
hotel.
half the episode and is a
Yep,
really claustrophobic little scene, which cost, £5.53 to produce.
easy to light.
And it's brilliant. And yet it's some of the most moving, thought-provoking TV you'll see. And yet it was produced ridiculously cheaply by the looks of things. It looked
Mhm.
professional. It looked like the inside of an actual bus, which is
Yeah,
all it
yeah.
needs to be.
Yeah. I mean, it looked like the legitimate, you like a legitimate hotel with whites only or a motel and a legitimate warehouse back lot. And I think they also had like an orange or red filter on it to make it seem a bit warmer, give it like a southern feel in the
Mhm.
camera rather than like a blue filter, like you get a New York kind of gritty city look. So you had
Yeah,
a,
exactly.
yeah,
Although it
there,
was set in December, so it didn't need to be that sunny.
right.
But
Well, but yeah, but
we'll let
you
them off
kind of
because it
expect
is
the
still the
South. Yeah.
South.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. So yeah, they like you can do a lot with lighting and with you don't need a huge budget to tell a great story. I mean, look at Deadpool,
Yeah.
the first movie. It's and sometimes that parsimony, that sometimes that being restricted like that makes you more creative because then you can't just use your special effects as a crutch, Stephen Moffat.
Yeah. Like I say, I mean, I said to you, didn't I? It was the last bastion of the creatively bereft,
Yeah,
and
yeah.
it is.
Hmm.
It's, I mean, and it goes back as old as moving pictures. Charlie Chaplin always despised what were the special effects of his day. He said that kind of moving background thing and the car chase and the explosion were just the laziest film producing stuff. You need to actually write a story.
Yeah,
You have to tell a story, and that's ultimately the same. That hasn't changed because human beings haven't changed. The technology has changed. It needs to be updated and more professional than it was. But ultimately, I will happily watch a piece of shit with a good story
a Michael Bay film.
um, rather than the Fast
Anything
and the
by Michael Bay.
Furious
Yeah.
or what's not the Indispensables, whatever they're called,
Oh,
the
the no, oh yeah, the I either don't know or oh well, I know, but
Expendables, the Expendables.
yes.
I was close. Yeah, which is all flashbang wallop, brilliantly produced, all slick and fun the story's dreadful.
Or what is
The
it?
story is just Arnold Schwarzenegger and Bruce Willis are gonna arm wrestle and then measure the size of their dicks. Like, oh
Yeah.
god,
Or Transformers
embarrassing.
movies.
Yeah, yeah,
Yeah. Really,
yeah.
30 minutes of quality television. I mean, if I watched that and I had to like go,
49 minutes. 49 minutes.
sorry, 49 minutes of quality British programming. If I would lean over, grab, as I was dabbing my eyes and blowing my nose, going,
Or are you
stop.
throwing shade on nine? Are you throwing shade on 19 minutes of the episode?
No, no,
Because
no.
that's harsh. Harsh.
Didn't know how long it was
I mean,
because I
there's
was
a little
happy
bit of
Highbler.
filler, but not much.
But I
A
would
bit
have
of
felt like, yeah,
exposition, and a bit of hammy acting at times. But I mean, I'm nitpicking. You're being
yeah,
harsh.
yeah. But no, I mean, I would have felt like I got my license fees worth out of that episode.
Well, you did, and you didn't even fucking pay your license
Yeah.
fee. So
I would if they'd let me. I really wish the British Parliament would allow anyone who pays the BBC license fee for,
to have
watch
access
it
to
for a year.
the
Yeah, why
you
not?
can
I can't.
then listen to all the
Global.
radio stations and
Yeah.
stuff live.
Well, that's all free anyway, which is stupid. I mean, it's not
Well,
stupid.
it's
I'm
free
glad they
in
do it.
Britain.
I think it's also free online. Maybe not live, but
Uh,
certain programs
No,
are.
no, on the iPlayer, you have to actually sign
Oh,
in as like a
yeah.
British resident.
Yeah, like let the world support the
Yeah,
BBC
exactly.
Parliament. Why should the British taxpayer fund all that? Let the rest of the world contribute if they want.
Technically, it's not a British taxpayer thing.
Well,
it's
no,
a
it's you're
separate
right.
matter.
It's a residence thing because I wasn't a British
Yeah,
tax. Well, I was a British taxpayer, but I paid, if you want to call the license fee a tax, but fee payers. So anyone,
yeah,
yes,
exactly. Fee payers,
make it a global
absolutely.
fee payer system, not just a
What
residence.
mind you always annoyed me. Whenever I've used bits of content from the British Parliament, which is filmed exclusively by the BBC,
Mm.
or by BBC cameras, it's got the BBC Parliament channel. Um, I've paid for that twice, right? I've paid my taxpayer money to fund Parliament, which I've no problem with,
Yeah,
and my license fee for
license
the
fee.
BBC
Yeah,
to film it. Again, I've got no problem with it. So I've paid for it twice, and yet I get fucking copyright struck for it.
That
I've
is
paid
bull.
for it twice, you bastards. What
And
the
honestly,
fuck?
like, I don't know if C-SPAN does copyright stuff, but I don't
Yeah.
think they should. I think, like, when you're
Well,
doing stuff with government, you
I
should
don't
definitely
mind
not.
the BBC. Sorry, I was just going to say I don't mind the BBC doing stuff for like The Office or
Yeah,
Sherlock because they'll
yeah.
sell DVDs of that. So there's like a commercial interest in
Or
copyrighting that.
documentaries or whatever that they produce
Yeah,
and pay for.
exactly. Yeah. Whereas with the Parliament, are they really going to put together 2018's top 100 backbench contributions to adjournment debates? No, they're not.
And this
There's
was
no money to be made from that. You know.
no, no. And the staffing too. You're literally talking about like one person and a camera or two people and a camera. And it's
Mhm.
already lit for you and you do the sound, but it's not like they don't have actors, they don't have a location, they don't have travel, they don't have catering and, craft services for the day. They're
Yeah.
literally just
The
public
the
they're
Prime
recording a
Minister doesn't
public
turn around
event.
and go, "Yeah, I know I'm supposed to answer this question, but what's my motivation, really? Like, where am I coming at it from this? I'm not getting a hook on this
Yeah.
character at all. The arc of this storyline just isn't getting me at all. Come on now."
Yeah,
And the
I
producer has to step in and go, "No, you've got the wrong line again." Oh god.
yeah, I
Yeah,
don't
there's none of
think
that.
that those things should be able to be copyrighted. If you're providing it for as a public service for public information, because it's a governmental, event and public hearing or debate or whatever, I think that should be exempt from copyright laws so that anyone can comment on
Yeah.
it and without having to worry about the BBC coming after them or C-SPAN coming after them. I don't, like I said, I don't even know if C-SPAN pursues that. I guess I could try. I could try, doing something that had the C-SPAN logo and see how long it took to get a copyright strike.
I love watching the C-SPAN phone-ins because they always get really, really racist people.
Yeah,
Or
yeah. There's
as I
this,
call them, Americans.
there doesn't seem to be a screener before those
No, no.
calls.
Yeah,
They're
they
probably
should
just
say
happy.
when you ring up C-SPAN, are you going to refer to anyone as the N-word or as
Yeah.
a wetback or anything like that?
Or start talking
Yeah,
about weird
okay, never
conspiracy
mind.
theories. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, do you think the Jews did 9/11? Okay, bye. Like,
Goodbye. Yeah. Or in case you're Megyn Kelly, you are gonna defend blackface on national television and then lose your
Ah,
career,
that's
you lose your
I'll
program
we'll
over
talk
it.
about this off air, but there's a thing. There's a thing about that. We need
There's
to
a
talk
thing
about it
about
off
that.
air.
Oh, okay.
I'm tantalizing the viewers there with something that might happen in the future, possibly.
Yeah, yes, I'll
Which we
know
would have
about
talked
long
about
before you.
which we would have talked about before the show, but, some
Had
people
I
aren't
got the time
reliable.
right. So
Some
what
people
I
are
was doing,
just badly organised. Oh,
that
I
is
I
true.
can't stand it.
I got the time zones wrong. And before I came on air, what was distracting me was I bought my mom an Echo Dot and I was setting it up. And I also got her an Amazon plug so that when she goes into her reading room, she can just say first plug on and the lights come on. And then she can say first plug off and her reading light will go off. So I was
That's
being a
all.
good daughter, or
And
trying
that'll
anyway.
teach you. Don't do that in the future.
Yeah, well, I messed up because I was 10 minutes late for our show. I was like 11 minutes or whatever it was. Ah, the fun of international travel.
Indeed, indeed.
I lose
Well,
the ability to tell time across time zones.
and I mean, all you've done is gone back to try and stop your democracy from becoming a
A
totalitarian
fashion
fascist
nation, yeah.
murder zone.
Can
But
I
other than
actually
that,
I don't know, do I have it here? I have somewhere, no, I have it on somewhere else, but I've got the 14 things that the fascist regimes of Hitler, Mussolini, Franco, and some other ones that somebody analyzed back in the day, and there are 14 things that fascists do, and Donald Trump is
are
doing
you
all of them.
Umberto Eco's fascism?
It,
Is that what you're
have I
referring
read it?
to?
It's no, I don't have the list with you. I put it up on Twitter earlier today, so maybe I can go back and look
Okay.
it up. I don't know if it was Echo's list. Is his 14 points of different things
I
that
think
fascists do?
so.
Yeah,
I
it's a
think
very
so.
famous one. I mean, it had like a 1953 kind of copyright maybe on it.
Yeah, I
Um,
think that's Eco's fascism or eternal fascism.
okay,
Yeah.
yeah. I'm on my Twitter feed now, looking at my tweets because I don't know if I did so many. Oh, I
Well,
found it
yeah,
right here.
and you should go and give.
Oh no, it's actually Lawrence Brill.
Oh, okay.
Okay, it's called 14 Defining Characteristics of Fascism by Dr. Lawrence Brill. Brill examined fascist regimes of Hitler, Mussolini, Franco, Suarta, and several Latin American regimes. He found 14 defining characteristics common to each. One, powerful and continuing nationalism. Fascist regimes tend to make constant use of patriotic mottos, slogans, symbols, songs, and other paraphernalia. Trump loves his big, big flags.
Well, yeah, he
Disdain,
literally and he literally just said, "I'm a nationalist"
yeah,
at a
he did.
rally. So
Yeah, yeah. He
check.
just forgot to put off the white in front of it.
Well, indeed, yes, yeah. Anyway,
Two,
so let's. I mean, this has got nothing to do with Doctor Who now, but fuck it,
no,
we're in the
no,
after
no.
bar.
Exactly, we're in
Let's
the
go.
after
Let's go
bar.
through these. So check
Yeah.
one. Scratch that
Yeah,
one.
we'll see.
Good.
Number 2, disdain for recognition of human rights. I'll just read the first sentence. Because of fear of enemies and the need for security, the people in fascist regimes are persuaded that human rights can be ignored in certain cases because of need.
I've got 3 words for you.
Check,
Babies
check, and
in
check.
cages.
Yeah, yeah. Or sending
Check.
the military to the U.S. border to stop people from
Yeah.
malnourished women and children from coming over.
Yep.
So check. Number 3, identification of an enemy's slash scapegoat as a unifying cause. The people are rallied into a unifying patriotic frenzy over the need to eliminate a perceived common threat or foe, racial, ethnic, or religious minorities, liberals, communists, socialists, terrorists, etc.
Yeah. Well, take your pick. Mexicans, Latinos, MS-13, the Democrats, George Soros. Yeah.
Yep. Number 4, supremacy of the military. Even when there are widespread domestic problems, the military is given disproportionate amount of government funding and the domestic agenda is neglected. Like parades.
Yeah.
Like
Yeah.
wanting to
Well,
hold.
not just parades, but the fact that the already ridiculously bloated, over bloated American military budget he increased, was it 70 billion or something ridiculous?
Oh, yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, yeah.
Absurd.
So, check.
Yep.
Number 5, rampant sexism. The governments of fascist let me start again in English. The governments of fascist nations tend to be almost exclusively male dominated. Under fascist regimes, traditional gender roles are made more rigid.
Yeah, I mean, grab him by the pussy, and he's trying to literally eradicate trans people from legal existence.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
Check.
Yeah, check. Number 6, controlled mass media. Sometimes the media is controlled by the government, but in other cases, the media is indirectly controlled by government regulations or sympathetic media spokespeople and executives.
Well, Fox News and fake
Mhm.
news, and
Exactly.
the fact that they've got like they're literally chanting, against the media, and they've got fucking t-shirts worn at his rallies invoking violence and murder, lynching of journalists.
Yeah. Yep.
Check.
Check. Number 7, obsession with national security. Fear is used as a motivational tool by the government over the masses.
ICE are, as far as I'm concerned, the modern day Gestapo.
Mm-hmm.
Check.
Number 8, religion and government are intertwined. Governments in fascist nations tend to use the most common religion in the nation as a tool to manipulate public opinion. Religious rhetoric and terminology is common from government leaders, even when the major tenets of religions are diametrically opposed to the government's policies or actions. The faith and freedom, whatever Jeff Sessions' new thing is to defend religious
Well,
freedom.
yeah, I mean, literally, the vice president wants to electrocute the gay away.
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
Yeah,
so we're seeing increasingly, and the elevation of religion in public life, Christian,
I'm
white
going to
male.
make it into 3 syllables, but check.
Okay. Number 9, corporate power is protected. The industrial and business aristocracy of a fascist nation are often the ones who put the government leaders into power, creating a mutually beneficial business/government relationship and power elite.
Well, that's not just true of Trump. I think that's been true in America for a very long
Yeah,
time.
that's a standing practice, to be honest. Number
Mm.
10, labor power is suppressed because of the organizing power of labor. It's the only real threat to fascist governments. Labor unions are either eliminated entirely or severely suppressed. Although we have basically no labor union in the U.S., so that's except for the
True, but
public.
even
They're dismantling that too in the public
yeah,
sector now.
well, exactly, yeah, but even so, even though you have, like you say, very little by way of trade union activity, he still Trump was pictured with us pointing to a sign at one of his rallies that said, "Unions are destroying America."
Ah, God.
How are they doing anything to America?
Yeah. At this point, they're
That's
not.
like
They have so
saying
little power.
that's like saying Mars is destroying America,
Hmm.
doing
But
nothing.
again, scapegoat,
Yep.
demonizing. Number 11, disdain for intellectuals and the arts. Fascist nations tend to promote and tolerate open hostility to higher education and academia. It's not
Oh,
uncommon for
oh
professors and
God.
academics to be censored or even arrested.
Yeah. I mean, just yeah, ridiculous.
Listen to
But
Trump.
well, not just Trump, but the entirety of the
Well, yeah.
American right with its all the universities are full of the Marxists. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
Number 12. Obsession with crime and punishment. Under fascist regimes, the police are given almost limitless power to enforce laws. The people are often willing to overlook police abuses and even forgo civil liberties in the name of patriotism.
Well, again, that's a long-standing American
Mhm.
tradition.
Yeah, so check. He's just building on that. He's not starting
Yeah,
it
well,
over.
exactly. Yeah,
Like,
he's in no way am I saying that Trump is therefore the equivalent, because I think he's worse on every single one of these points so far. Yeah.
yeah. Number 13, rampant cronyism and corruption. Fascist regimes almost are always governed by a group of friends and associates who appoint each other to government positions and use government power and authority to protect their friends from accountability. It's not uncommon in fascist regimes for national resources and even treasures to be appropriated or outright stolen by government leaders.
Well, that would only work if, say, his daughter and his
Mm,
son-in-law were put in positions of power that they literally have no qualifications or suitability to be in.
right. And then be given positions like diplomatic, contact
Yeah,
for the richest oil-rich
yeah.
nation in the Middle
And
East.
pushing his daughter, who's ridiculous, to be the United Nations spokesperson for America,
Yeah.
or ambassador, I should say, for America.
Yeah.
Yeah, checkity fucking check.
And the last point, 14. Fraudulent elections. Sometimes elections in fascist nations are a complete sham. Other times elections are manipulated by smear campaigns against or even assassinations of opponents' candidates or opposition candidates. The use of legislation to control voting numbers or political district boundaries and manipulation of the media. Fascist nations also typically use their judiciaries to manipulate or control elections. Brett
Yeah, yeah,
Kavanaugh.
yeah. Brett Kavanaugh's first vote was to reaffirm North Dakota, possibly. Um,
Oh, this was the
um,
Native American
yeah, the
excluding.
Native
Yeah,
Americans who were basically struck off from the voting register en masse, and
because
that was fine apparently.
right, because the law was that you had to have a street address in order to vote. But because people in reservations don't have traditional street addresses, many of them had post office boxes where they could get their post that served as their alternative address. And that was deemed okay to say, no, you have to have a street address. If you have a PO box, even if you're Native American in these situations, somehow that's not a barrier. So now people are having to register at like street addresses in order to get their access to their ballots.
Ridiculous. And
Yeah,
well, it's not just that, but I mean that's by comparison to some of the voter suppression in some states, that's actually relatively minor in
right.
number. I
Yes,
mean, just hundreds of thousands purged, and it's always
yeah.
poor people and black people.
Yeah, it's definitely it's places like
Yeah.
Georgia, and I don't wanna just say in the South, because 'cause let's just face it, I mean, Jim Crow the Republicans have taken Jim Crow nationwide. Scott
Mm.
Walker in Wisconsin is all much about Jim Crow as, somebody in
And
the South is.
the twatting the governor of Maine is a very, very
Oh,
racist guy. Yeah,
hugely racist guy,
yeah.
that guy.
And
Yeah.
that is literally as north as it gets. Well, apart from Alaska, but whatever. But then again, Alaska had Sarah Palin. Checkmate. Like, you know.
Yeah, so you just go down that list and check, 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 check. You can see all the things that, and it's as you point out, it's not just Trump. There were the foundations
Oh,
for
and
this.
gerrymandering. Sorry, I forgot to mention
Oh,
gerrymandering.
oh
Another
yeah,
way they're doing it. Sorry, go on. Yeah.
yeah. No, it's true. Yeah, all kinds of ways. ID issues, under resourcing, polling locations in poor places, putting a polling location a mile outside the city, but no buses go there. That's a way.
Yeah.
Green
Yeah,
out
putting a
parking
polling
space.
station at top of a mountain. Yeah,
Yeah.
it was there. You just couldn't be bothered to hike 5 miles up a fucking sheer cliff face.
Hmm.
You lazy
Yeah.
bastards. Actually, but
So
one thing that wasn't mentioned in the Doctor Who episode, but is relevant, I suppose, to the idea of democracies not necessarily being very democratic,
yeah.
was when black people were given the vote in America. In many, especially southern states, although it wasn't exclusively in the South, black people had to take an education test, and
A
they were
literacy,
deliberately
yeah.
designed literacy test, sorry, yeah, and they were deliberately designed to be as confusing as possible, to the point where there was a black guy who was a professor, right, who's like an actual like proper fucking intellectual, who failed
Yeah.
because they were deliberately like they would set up questions so it was a trick question, so no matter which way they answered, you could mark them down as wrong.
Yep.
So basically, black people in theory were allowed to vote. In actuality, they were not.
There were also, I think they made attempts with grandfather laws, like if your grandfather couldn't vote, you couldn't vote, and
Well, hang
everybody
on, so
had
they're trying to grandfather them out.
yeah,
That's
pretty sure that's how
amazing.
that worked.
That's ridiculous.
Yeah.
I shouldn't laugh, but I mean that's imagine if they put that creative mental power to something positive.
Yes.
Jesus.
As opposed to oppressing part of your population that you're afraid of because you've been oppressing them. It's a vicious cycle. You oppress people, you know you're oppressing them. They want their freedom, you keep denying it, and you're scared of them wanting basic things that you have. So you just keep, yeah. Oh,
And that's, I mean, we
racism is
see that
dumb.
now with the way people, the white straight man is the vulnerable minority. That
Yes.
anything approaching equality to those who had
Suppression.
supremacy
Hmm.
seems like they're being done down,
Yep.
and they're not. They're still getting favourable treatment, just not as favourable, and therefore they feel oppressed.
Other people get the same favorable treatment, and to them, that feels like oppression.
Yeah,
Like just as the basic treatment that they were getting, not even favorable. Not we're not even talking about affirmative action here to actually remedy and overcome the problems that are systematically built in because of generations of this, but just having basic equality. It feels like you're giving
yeah. I,
something
well,
else
I always say to these people
to
who
them.
want equal opportunity, not equal outcome.
Yeah.
Well, in that case, you would have to oppose any kind of inheritance.
Mm-hmm.
You would have to literally say inheritance should be made illegal then. Because how can Donald Trump be said to have had equal opportunity with Barack Obama?
Yeah.
He
Yeah.
didn't.
You can't. And if you can't have equality of opportunity, then you're certainly not going to get equality of outcome. But they keep focusing on criticizing the outcome equality, not looking at how
Well,
unequal
well I saw
opportunities are in the start.
well, I saw George Clooney's fantastic riposte to Donald Trump, which he wrote a couple of days ago, but I only saw it today. When Trump had been attacking Clooney as a Hollywood elite, which is true to an extent. He is obviously not really connected to the real world anymore,
Mhm.
but Donald Trump has never been.
No.
And George Clooney wrote a brilliant piece about. He grew up in Kentucky. He was a poor guy. He had to sell door to door insurance. Like he actually lived a real life before becoming a rich famous actor. And I think the reason that Donald Trump attacks people like that, especially, I think, is because he realizes that had Donald Trump been born in the same scenario as George Clooney, he would never have made it to the level he has.
No. Oh no.
George Clooney was
Oh
successful
no.
despite his upbringing, whereas Donald Trump was only successful because of his
Yeah.
upbringing.
And he was barely
And
that.
that's why he can see every time someone from humble beginnings gets to roughly his sort of level of fame or success in whatever field, it reminds him that he knows he's not as good as them.
Hmm. Oh, all that I think he's driven entirely by his insecurities and his sense of
Yeah,
a grievance. Being grievance against everything that ever happens. And we find this is just, it's so typically fascist too, that, he calls for violence, he promotes violence, he applauds people who commit violence, like that congressman who was actually convicted of assault on a journalist. And then when people like, get bombs, or bombs are sent to people he has named, he refuses to take any responsibility and he puts the blame on others. And this is so
well,
dangerous.
for me, I think he is absolutely complicit in not just in the acts themselves, but has now excused them away. It seems to me
Yeah.
because he's come out and said that CNN need to be more fair with their analysis. Well, so basically, you're saying they deserve to have a bomb sent to them?
And he
That's
apparently, I didn't
essentially what
realize
you're
this.
saying there.
Yeah.
If you read, you don't even
Yeah.
have to
Yeah.
read between the lines particularly. It's just there. You're saying they brought this upon
On
themselves.
themselves. Yeah.
It's classic victim blaming, which we shouldn't be surprised about with Trump.
Yeah.
It's his raison d'etre,
Hmm.
or his the way he
Modus
operates.
operandi,
Modus
basically.
operandi.
Mm.
Apologies, people. My
For the
Latin
wrong
is
Latin.
my Latin is wrong. Although I had a funny experience actually. I did a debate with not debate, like a chat with live stream with Count Dankula, and I stumbled upon the fact that he didn't know what the words de facto meant.
Oh, I
Yeah, I
started
was
to watch
explaining the
that.
difference
Yeah.
between the actual head of state, the Queen, and the de
Hmm.
facto head of state, the Prime Minister. Meaning that I was saying that she actually has the power and the Queen doesn't. And he then argued that exact point because he clearly hadn't understood
Oh,
what de facto meant. And so as soon
mhm.
as I explained what de facto meant, he went, "Oh, okay." Like he didn't know what it meant. Oh wow, UKIP best and brightest are
Yeah. I
special.
I did start to watch that. But to be honest, I kind of hit a wall early on when he just could not seem to understand why, if you are a trans person in the US and you are not allowed to change the sex assigned to you at birth to reflect who you are in your life at that moment, that would somehow not be repressive or oppressive. Or
Well, he
and I
kept
was like,
saying it's about representation, which in of itself isn't an
I
argument
don't even
against it
understand what
because
he meant by that.
well, it's he was going about why do you need to have it recognised? Well, because there are things called legal rights, and I kept trying to explain this to him. It's not even about. I said let's set aside the idea of it being about representation or how people see themselves. It's just let's just look at it from a purely legal point of view. He's trying to erase them as legal entities,
Yeah, I would have
um,
said,
and he
"Hey,
couldn't get that point.
yeah,
I was trying to explain to him in court law. In law, they take into account who you are, obviously, when they
no,
decide.
if I were there, I would have said, okay, let's imagine Count Dankula. What's his real name?
Marcus Meacham.
Marcus. Imagine that there was a mistake on your birth certificate and you were put down as being female at birth, and this law was in effect and you couldn't change it,
Are you
right?
suggesting he's
Now,
human?
no. Now imagine every time you have to show your ID and it has the wrong sex on it, or your passport has the wrong sex on it, and you have to explain this every single time because you're not allowed to change a mistake. That is why it matters, because they
Yeah.
shouldn't have to deal with that shit. You
And not
wouldn't
just
want
that,
to
but
deal
you
with that
can't even
shit.
change a mistake that someone else made.
Yes. And so I was like, I'm out of here. Like, this is too
Yeah.
dumb for
No,
me.
I get that. And I hopefully those who stuck with it
Yeah.
can at
Had
least
better patience than I had.
had better patience and at least appreciated that I had the patience to continue with that line of
Yeah.
argumentation. And hopefully a few of his fans kind of went, oh, okay. Because I had some people come over and say, yeah, you had some good points. And that's something. That's why I
No,
do that.
that's
'Cause
true.
hopefully,
Yeah.
pardon?
No, that's good. That's, if you can reach a few people and make them think,
Yeah.
that's the whole purpose of talking to him, is to,
Mm,
sometimes, as you point out, reach his audience, because he's got a
yeah.
vested interest in not changing his mind on things.
Yeah, and it's the classic tactic that these people, the classical liberals, of minimizing whatever Trump does.
Oh, always.
Literally, if he did what Trump said, sort of joked about doing, although I secretly suggest he would want to do it if he could. If he went down to Fifth Avenue and shot someone, they'd go, "Oh, it's not that bad. He wasn't really aiming at them. It was accidental. Something,
If he didn't
something.
want to be
It's
shot,
always
why was he in
minimizing."
Fifth Avenue?
Exactly. Well, I did quite. I did a joke piece of victim blaming, and it was only it's just meant to be like elaborative. Um, someone was doing pointing out Trump's victim blaming with a joke that said, Ronald Reagan deserved Ronald Reagan was asking for it when he got shot or something like that. And
Right.
I said, yeah, exactly. If he didn't want to get shot, why did he have a body? Why,
Yeah.
like bodies that we know are susceptible to being pierced very easily with bullets fired from guns. What he should have done is invested in some sort of adamantium exoskin, but he didn't. So it's
So it's
on
his
him.
fault. Yeah.
Exactly. Lazy.
And it's his, yeah, exactly. And it's Trump's
Bad
innate.
taste, but
Well, no, the point is how ridiculous it is that if you're going to
Mm,
blame people for being someplace and existing,
yeah,
that's just completely ridiculous. But
yeah, exactly. Yeah, and not just that, but some of the right wing conspiracies have been amazing because the person, whoever sent or person slash persons who sent these bombs, they had on the outside like from Debbie Wasserman Schultz, as if
oh, so use
she'd
other
sent it.
Democrats, right?
Yeah, exactly right.
Yeah.
But that suggests that Debbie Wasserman Schultz is so dense that she would want a live bomb delivered back to her if it wasn't delivered to the actual address. What? What? What?
Well,
But and what criminal has details about them on the evidence? A bank robber doesn't go in there and start handing out contact details. Do you know what I mean? It's ridiculous. It's
yeah.
so stupid.
But did you see? I have to read the full article,
Oh,
but I did see a headline that said Ann Coulter and Rush Limbaugh were basically calling this a fake
yeah. Oh no,
bomb
absolutely. Yeah, they've
already.
not just that. Lou Dobbs called it fake.
And Chuck Grassley. Chuck Grassley from the Judiciary Committee has now ordered or organized or is directing an investigation of Michael Avenatti because of what he said during the Kavanaugh hearings and his
Fuck him.
client. This is
Yeah.
how they yeah. So,
Though again, this is fascist regimes in the
yes,
making here.
yes,
If
it's
you
not in
dare
the
to, if
making.
you
It's
dare to
happening right
disagree with the
now.
deal, if you disagree with the dear leader, life can be made very difficult for you.
Exactly. And this is it. When people protest, they're called the enemy. When they get sent bombs, people are told, oh, they sent them to themselves for attention. And then when they're killed, like, oh, they had it coming.
Yeah,
This is the dehumanization, the scapegoating. This is what fascist regimes do. Yes, Trump is a fascist regime operating under the guise of democracy.
it's very thin, guys.
Very thin, guys. And
Yep.
we're going to test how thin it is on November 6th. We'll see whether or not the Democrats can actually
Yes.
manage to get a
Well, I
house.
mean, hopefully everything goes well and you're able to escape back to the civilized world.
Yeah, well, German permanent residency is looking better and better. Just as in case I need to
Well,
establish,
you can come and live. You can come and live in global Britain. That'll be fun.
is that the new ad
We
campaign?
can be. Yeah, we no. They're calling it the government global Britain. They're
It's,
saying like that's their catchphrase
they
in
have never
global
tried.
Britain.
No, no, no. These people who want to advertise a global Britain have never gone through customs at Heathrow. They would know it's not global.
No, it's a lot of bollocks. Yeah,
Yeah,
absolutely. But you should come. Yeah, you should come and live in post Brexit Britain, and
I
we
would
can
if I could.
scavenge the tips together. We can
It's
be
like the
we
Rick and
can be
Morty
scavenger
episode.
buddies.
Yeah, we can have the what do they call the crone hat? What was like they call it the monsters in Rick and Morty that everybody was um distorted into. It's the same Cronenbergs. Wasn't it like David
Cronenbergs.
Cronenbergs?
Yes.
Yeah, David
Well, no, I
Cronenbergs.
don't think the genetics are going to change that quickly, Christo. It's not a
But
fucking
in terms
nuclear
of
explosion.
Hobbesian, all against all, life is nasty, brutish, and short post
Well, that's still
Brexit
true.
Britain.
I mean, that's to be honest, that's been Britain's outlook for centuries. That won't have changed. It's just it will be far more real than we actually want it to be.
Uh, well, yeah, we have to laugh because otherwise we cry.
Exactly. The world is shit. Let's just watch
Mhm.
Doctor Who and pretend it doesn't exist.
Yes, precisely.
That's
Well,
what.
hey,
So when I literally said, "Let's talk about something more cheery," racial segregation.
it
I
was
mean,
actually
bizarrely, I wasn't actually that far off,
no,
to be honest. That was far more true than we should be comfortable with.
nah. Happily, it was fictionalized with a happy ending, so it was
Yeah,
guaranteed.
yeah,
But the
that's
reality is,
that's true.
mm.
But it was good overall. It was a good episode, and fuck Trump.
And Stephen Moffat, but for very different reasons.
Yeah, I mean, to be fair, Steve Moffat's just a hack. I don't think he's
Yeah, yeah,
actually
yeah, yeah.
a danger to Western civilization and
No,
world
or global
stability.
security, yeah,
Yeah,
or the
or the
world
economy
economy,
of the world. Yeah,
or
yeah.
the stabilized situation with nuclear weapons productions, which Trump is
Yeah,
also.
I don't think Stephen Moffat may be many things, but I don't think he's
No,
literally going to
I
start a
can't.
nuclear arms race.
I can't
I
put
don't
that on.
think so. I can't say 100%. I'd love to be, well, no, I'd hate to be proven wrong, but I don't think I'm going to be proven wrong on that. I think
Yeah, like the last.
he's going to remain making slightly underwhelming TV.
Yeah, that's really his greatest crime. I mean, yeah,
Yeah.
Sherlock 4 was horrific, but really it's minor. It's like nothing on the scale of what Trump can do in an average day.
Well, it was pretty bad though.
It was terrible. It was
It
so
was
awful.
fucking dreadful.
Ugh.
And after all the good done in 1, 2, and 3.
Honestly, like there was only ever one good episode, and it was the first one. It was the only thing that came close to actually being. And I mean, H Bomber Guy, of course, has said this more articulately and for 2 hours. But even before he put into words my feelings, I already knew. I kept saying, why don't they just do like another version of A Study in Pink, where you take a classic story and you modernize it, you give it a twist, but then you actually have a mystery you solve. And yeah, I think we all knew something was wrong. But,
I don't
all
know what
right.
I'm more depressed about: series 4 of Sherlock or impending fascist regimes.
Well, from a distance, I guess you could be more personally
I
affected by
suppose
Sherlock.
I mean, ultimately, future historians will decide, but the
Mm.
fascists are probably worse, I imagine. But series
Well,
4, don't let that disguise the fact that series 4 was a crime against humanity.
it was an arts, yeah, in terms of the arts, yes.
Mm.
It was sort of right up
Exactly,
there
it
with
was like wiping your
Ishtar.
ass with the Mona Lisa. Like it was
Right.
just disgusting.
That's kind of what he did with the Sherlock character. But yeah, that
Indeed,
doesn't.
indeed.
Yeah, but then you put that in perspective of caging babies
He
and
pissed on the grave of Arthur Conan Doyle.
mm,
which
Yeah, but
would be slightly illegal, I suppose.
wouldn't it be nice if we had a normal democracy where Stephen Moffat's things were be something we could legitimately get upset over because things were okay? I mean, I would wish that for everybody to live in a
Yeah.
have such a lifestyle that they could their major
Oh,
emotional traumas had to do
yeah,
with like a genre piece
the
that they
good
could
old days when um, when pipe bombs were rare.
well, yeah,
Uh,
or yeah,
not
something by the
non-existent, just
Unabomber, where it was like a wasn't necessarily tied to destroying a political party or
oh well,
killing
Ann
political
Coulter
leaders.
again. Yeah, Ann Coulter named the Unabomber in the title of an article she wrote or published on Twitter or whatever, um, which named the Unabomber as a liberal. Now, trust me, I did that thing where I said I did the joke thing of Unabomber or YouTube Skeptic, which was a show I did,
Yes, I remember.
which was funny, but involved me reading the Unabomber's manifesto, and I can assure you, the section that's entitled "The Dangers of Leftism" suggests to me that he's not on the left.
Yeah.
Call me crazy, but I think that kind of rules him out, really.
I do still feel a little bit like I'm standing in a room with people going, this is a fascist government. People are like, oh, that sounds a little bit extreme. I'm like, no, it's not extreme. That's what's really happening. And Ann
Well,
Coulter doing
I'm
this is
sorry,
another
I
example of
mean,
the fake news.
yeah, well, the Democrats the high-ranking Democrats anyway, are just as complicit in this nonsense. It seems to me, or complicit in the madness, not necessarily the evil. When you have people like, oh, what's his fucking face? I've totally forgotten his name. Mr.
Congress.
Tan, Mr. Tan. I've forgotten his name. Anyway, um, published a thing. Chuck Schumer
Oh,
published
okay.
a thing with a tweet with the left and the right are equally bad type. It was a typical horseshoe theory thing
Mm.
and he was essentially drawing a comparison between some shit. And someone rightly pointed out, I'm sorry, it's not equivalent. Sending pipe bombs to people or running Heather Heyer over to death is not the same as someone shouting at you in a restaurant.
Yes.
Those are not equivalent things.
Yeah.
One punch to
I
Richard
didn't see the
Spencer's head
Schumer thing.
does not equate attempted mass assassination.
No. And I wouldn't. I would also say that shouting people out of restaurants is a perfectly acceptable form of public protest. Because those people probably get chucked out of the restaurant too. But they're taking a public stance and they're saying, "Look, this is unacceptable." But
Hmm.
that's not violence. And so all of the Republicans who, yeah, anyone else who is tut-tutting, any of the liberals or sides in the Democrats, like, oh, we shouldn't do this. Yeah, I want to make sure that those people are talking about the pipe bombs.
Yeah, stick your fucking horseshoe right up your ass. And just
Hmm.
to anyone who tries to call foul on me on this, me supporting Richard Spencer being punched is not the same thing because again, if the leftists start sending pipe bombs en masse to people, then come back and we'll have that conversation.
Yeah.
Until then, fuck off.
I think what you're talking about is your point is that these are people who publicly make statements that are calling for the harm of others and making them feel afraid to say those things to endanger the lives of others in public is, in the aggregate, a good thing. I think that's your
Yeah,
position. And
yeah,
that's not the
yeah,
same
absolutely.
as sending pipe bombs to the former president, right? Or the former
And
or
that's
Hillary
but sending
Clinton.
and then having the president do the oh well, the press need to they're part of the problem too.
Yeah, they need to be more civil. The press needs to be press needs to be more civil, covering me saying I'm happy for when people body slam reporters.
Exactly.
It's CNN's fault.
Exactly. Yeah, exactly. And Horseface needs to be more civil. And the women
Oh
whose
boy.
pussies I grabbed need to be more civil.
Did you see the guy who assaulted a woman and gave the excuse while the president said it was okay to grab women?
Indeed, that was on an airplane, wasn't it? Yeah.
Hmm. Trump's America.
Yes, I think he may have slightly coarsened what was already not a particularly brilliant public discourse in America.
Mm.
Call me crazy, but I think he's made things worse.
And all of this plays into Putin's hands. All of this plays
Oh,
into
he's
Putin's
chuckling
hands.
his bollocks
Oh,
off. America in living memory.
yeah.
America has never been weaker.
No, it's so weak everywhere. Yeah, it's retreating everywhere. It's aligning itself with people like the
And
Saudis and
a point,
Putin.
yeah, a point you made very early in the Trump presidency, but I think becomes more and more true by the day, is that actually he isn't the leader of the free world anymore. Angela Merkel is,
Hmm.
and I think what was brought. And by the way, I'm not saying I'm a big fan of Angela Merkel's politics and all that, but there's decorum and diplomacy and statesmanship and or stateswomanship, statespersonship, whatever.
Mhm.
Yeah, with the
Mhm.
Khashoggi murder, which we talked about last time. Yeah, they've banned Germany have banned the sale of arms to Saudi Arabia,
Good.
taking the lead,
Yeah.
promoting hopefully some semblance of human rights and trying to incentivize the Saudi regime to not be massive pricks. Whereas America and unfortunately global Britain have not followed suit.
No. And Trump was saying that the Saudis are no different from Brett Kavanaugh when it comes to this accusations about stuff. He's
Yeah,
changed his
even though,
tune, but
well, he had to, yeah,
yeah, he
absolutely.
had to. That's it.
Because even the Saudis are now saying it was premeditated,
Yeah. Yes.
which is
We
ridiculous.
lied.
I mean, Trump, I, Trump, whenever because he said it was credible, which was amazing to me. So rape allegations are never credible in his eyes,
No.
but the allegation that they accidentally killed him in a fight and happened to have a bone saw to hack his body to pieces, presumably again on accident, that's credible. That
Hey,
story was credible to him.
innocent till proven guilty, right? It wasn't that
Well,
Trump's
exactly.
standard.
Well, I've always felt who amongst us hasn't gotten into a bar fight every now and again and hacked up a body? That
Yeah,
I mean, who hasn't done that? You know,
according to
who
Trump.
he who is without hacking bodies together sin cast the first stone.
I just wonder if he's actually going to stop the arms sales now.
Is
It's
he
going to
fuck?
no, he's
Is
going to
he
find a way around
fuck?
it. And they're not
Yeah.
even. They always promise they're going to buy like $100 billion trillion worth of stuff, and then they never do. They give you like your wish list for your end of the year, your
They
birthday.
are the official. Yeah, they are ultimate cock teasers.
Oh yeah,
Absolutely.
yeah. And then they don't buy half
But
of what they say
they
they're
sell
going
lots
to.
of oil, and that means that we're beholden to again fascists.
Oh yeah, the Saudi regime is
Yeah,
far
yeah,
from
absolutely.
liberal or humanitarian. Humanism at its
Exactly.
core.
Well, that's, I mean, the reason Trump doesn't react against the likes of Putin or the Saudis is because he's secretly rather jealous that they're able to deal with journalists that disagree with them in a way that he doesn't think he quite can yet.
Yeah, I think this is it. I can't even imagine the danger of a second term with Trump if Putin manages to with conspire with Republicans in order to undermine the elections to do the electoral college dance that they did the last time around. The America we know will be gone. I can't imagine 8 years. I mean, if the Republic, maybe with the House taken by the Democrats, we can help stave stuff off. But we're on a really dangerous track because it wouldn't take much for somebody else to pick up where Trump left off, if because of the Republican advantage that they've given themselves because of gerrymandering, voter suppression, and now stacking the courts.
And the fact that, 4 people and 2 cows in Montana have the same amount of power as 20 million Los Angeles citizens, it's
Yeah.
ridiculous. Anyway,
Well,
yeah,
hey,
should we actually, oh, Jesus, got about 2.5 hours in. Should we call it a day?
I think so. This was a good chat. And we went in some dark places at the end. But I think the overall thing was this was a valuable television episode. You can easily watch it with your family. You can watch it with young people. In fact, I would encourage people, if you can legally
Or
finance.
to extend the criminality even further and to implicate you, if you want, if you aren't able to access the iPlayer, contact Kristi and she'll send you the file that I filmed.
Yeah, yeah. Leave it up, leave it the link up, and I'll download it as a core thing. But
Yeah.
yeah. So I'm totally going to get arrested now next time I come into Britain.
Oh, that's okay because you might
I'll
get
call
fed in
you.
prison.
Yeah,
The
yeah, I'll
people
call
outside
you.
of the prison fucked. Yeah.
Call you for
Yeah,
my
exactly.
bail
Yeah,
money.
I'll try and get you in.
Trying to get me into the prison.
Yeah,
Out.
in a trebuchet.
Oh, you do the jailbreak for me. But yeah, we should wrap this up. So yeah, watch the episode, enjoy it. Comment, you guys. I saw in the chat, there were plenty of people commenting. So thanks for you guys in the chat for visiting, and being patient with my 10-minute delay at the start because I got the hour
Well,
wrong.
you notice how she's slipped into American sloppiness very quickly.
Yeah, I immediately
In
just.
Germany, she's efficient. Absolutely, absolutely. To the second. Whereas now in America, it's like,
Yeah.
should we call it a hard 15 minutes past?
Or it could just be the jet lag. So I was on a
Well, it
I
could
flew
be
to
that. It
Munich.
could be that.
I flew to Munich before I flew back across to Chicago, and then from Chicago to Appleton. So it was a long, and I it was basically had
So
delays,
you went the wrong way before coming
basically.
back on yourself.
Yeah. And also I got up in the morning. I was so proud of myself. I got up at 6 in the morning. I like did my last bit of dishes, took out my garbage. I made sure I have everything I needed. And I left the door like a half hour before I needed to leave to get to the airport, the usual amount of time. But then there was an emergency medical thing on the train. So I basically had to run to my gate to get my flight from Cologne to Munich. And then it was, I had to like, I was like
Same
40
Munich
minutes.
properly.
München.
München.
München. Yeah.
München. Yeah.
You have to kind of give it an you sound to
Yeah,
it
it's
because it's
pretty
got the
disgusting. Yeah.
umlauts over it. And so I ended up running to make my gate at Munich because of the anyway. And then in Chicago, I had 2 hours between when I got off the plane.
Dear listener, this is Kristi wrapping up apparently.
Yeah, this is me wrapping up. I had
Yeah.
2 hours for actually my flight landed 10 minutes early, so I had 2 hours and 10 minutes to go from Terminal 5 to Terminal 3 in my gate. And I got on my connecting flight 20 minutes before it left because I was stood in the immigration line for longer than I had to at Heathrow. And here's what pisses me off, right? British citizens, you guys, when you go to Heathrow, you guys get like a special line. And EU people get a special line. And then everybody else in the world gets shunted over where there's fewer staff and there's more questioning and whatever else. And like, I'm okay with that. I do that all the time in Europe because I'm not a European citizen, so I don't have that privilege. But when I come back to the States, I want to be treated special. And in
Yeah.
this case, it was all the Americans. They have this new system where you have to line up and you have to go to these machines and you have to take a picture with this machine and it gives you a ticket with your picture and your details after you scanned your passport. And then someone has to look at it and then you get in another line to have somebody else look at it and give it a stamp. And that line took forever. And then, even though I did not have to collect any baggage because I only took carry on, I had to wait in a line for someone to ask me if I had brought any seeds with me.
Oh God.
So before I could leave with my luggage, I had to go through another form of customs, and then I had to go through security in Chicago to make my because I had domestic incoming flight, and that was like over almost an hour. And that's
So
why
all I'm going to say is, did they get your stash of herb garden seeds?
no, it didn't. I
Because
made
that.
it no. Actually, didn't have
Oh.
any seeds. No,
Did you do the condom up the arse? Is that how you got them through? Dangerous technique. Because if they
But,
split inside you, you're going to have trees growing out your arse.
is that what you had?
I don't understand. All I'm saying is I have to lie on my front.
And you have an interesting relationship with Roundup weed killer.
Yeah, and and I can do topiary while I'm taking a dump.
Minge topiary. All right, and on that bombshell, and on that mental image of minge topiary, we're gonna call it the end of this episode of Kristi and Kevin's Happy Hour. Thank you guys for watching. Kevin's now going to tell me that intriguing thing he was thinking about off air, and you guys won't know about it. Right?
Yeah, absolutely.
If you remembered, I just
I
reminded
do.
you.
No, I do remember. Yeah, because it's a
Okay,
thing I
okay.
actually wanted to raise with you before. But anyway.
Okay, guys. So I have been Kristi. People in the chat, you've been awesome. People in the future, thanks for watching. And of
No,
course, my co-host Kevin
definitely not.
has actually been. Well, he did the hard work this time. So can we all give little Kevin a round of applause?
Don't fucking patronize me.
I'm patronizing you with patting my hands together. And then yeah, so goodbye from me and goodbye from Kev. So say goodbye, Kev.
Goodbye, Kev.
Catch you guys later. Bye.